All right, hello everyone, and welcome to this lovely Tuesday as we make our way into the ongoing reading of Anti-Oedipus from the Quarantine Collective. We are in section whatever the fuck into the book it is. Thank you for joining us on this lovely day. It's great to have you. It's good to be here. I'm pretty excited. I'm jazzed. Should be good overall. I think. Maybe. Who knows? Who fucking knows? I don't fucking know. If you'd like to join us live, you're more than welcome to. Literally no one's joined in the Discord, which, you know, happens once in a fucking while. Happens once in a while. Let me ping the server, get a few more people in here, and we'll jump over to the reading. Oh. All right, just 2 more seconds, then we'll get going, and I'll be able to spend a moment concentrating for a second. All right.
Hello, Bert.
Hello. See, there we go. People joining up. How happy.
I'm listening to your 2021, the 4 years ago, like, AO.
I'm sorry.
No, don't be sorry. Like it's very good. Like it's concise. It's very, organized.
If anything, think we haven't done very much better in conciseness.
Fair. Concise, I think, is probably a fair way to call it. It's also, I don't want to say wrong, but it's it's really tough for me to go back and listen to. It's very difficult. But I'm glad other people do. I encourage people to do it. Because, you get to at least hear, hey, Brooks is still not totally knowing his shit. He's asking questions. People are, it's I think, good for the most part. So, at least to take in. So, who knows? Who knows?
The things that you said about Lacan is actually kind of like you're not off the mark, like the things, especially the middle parts of the recordings that I went through.
Good. I'm glad I'm not wildly off the mark. It's good. It's still difficult for me to sort of take in, but that's the way it works. So, for the last, I don't know, what seems like 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 years, we've been making our way through the final chapter of Anti-Oedipus, this third time through the book. Taking our time because it is, to put it very lightly, it is a bear of a section. Everything they've laid out begins to come to a head. They begin weaving these concepts in and out of each other throughout. They begin working through a lot of what I would say are some bigger ideas. And it is a lot. It's a lot, like flatly. AO is just starting to get to be a lot. So as we go through, I'll go over what we did last week, then we'll just jump into this paragraph that is probably going to be the next 2.5 hours. As we go through, don't hesitate to interrupt. Don't hesitate to type out questions, especially you YouTubers in chat, but also you people here in Discord. I am watching. I do read them, and I try to get to as many as I can as we go. As we've built up how capitalism functions and how the power of the state mixed with capital creates sort of an oppressive, repressive organization of desire and the mechanisms of desire that sort of creates a space where desire desires its own repression. They've really leaned heavily into a handful of places, and it's not just in this, but in other writings of theirs. They want to talk about where do they find revolution and how does revolution seem to work? How does revolution seem to happen? Because it isn't a great man theory. This is not a person becomes in charge, says, now live this way and everyone gets in order. Instead, it is the entirety of society and the relationality between any single two parts in aggregate that seems to be creating the space. Because of this, there are a handful of places that they see, despite being captured by capital, which they are, they're also wanting to talk through how they offer us lines of flight, offer us revolutionary potential, offer us space where we can actually do a lot more. The first one they went through, which I think is easier for people to grasp, is art. Doesn't matter if art's co-opted by capital. It will always be. Everything is always co-opted by capital. That's not the interesting conversation for them. For them, it's the way art necessarily has to work, that art creates relationality within a frame. And that frame and that space within that frame and that relationality gives us room to play, gives us room to find lines of flight and revolutionary potential. But it is not just art. It is also science. And that's what we will be going through today, is that also, that way that science operates. Before I dive in, does anyone have any questions, comments, or anything before we get going? Because once I start talking, this is a lot.
You're kind of the. I don't see your PDF.
Oh yeah, no, I've got to share my screen. I got to do all those things.
Yeah.
We'll get there. We'll get there. Let me make sure my video is working properly. Good. Boop, boop, boop. How are you doing, Marcellus? All right. You should be able to see now. We are on page 370 for those of you following at home, but you can also just read along. Again, previous paragraph talking about art and art as experimentation. Just to read just the ending. Simply consists of liberating what was present in art from its beginnings, but was hidden underneath aims and objects, even if aesthetic, and underneath recordings or axiomatics. And this is their line about art. The pure process that fulfills itself, that never ceases to reach fulfillment as it proceeds. Art as experimentation. They go on. And the same will be said of science. The decoded flux of knowledge are first bound in the properly scientific axiomatics, but these axiomatics express a bipolar hesitation. One of the poles is the great social axiomatic that retains from science what must be retained in terms of market needs and zones of technical innovation. The great social aggregate that makes the scientific sub-aggregates into so many applications that are characteristic of and that correspond to it. In short, the set of methods that is not content to bring scientists back to reason, but anticipates any deviance on their part, imposes a goal on them, and makes scientists and science into an agency perfectly subjugated to the formation of sovereignty. For example, the way in which non-determinism was only tolerated to a point, then ordered to make peace with determinism. But the other pole is the schizoid pole, in whose proximity flux of knowledge schizophrenize, and not only flee across the social axiomatic, but pass beyond their own axiomatics, generating increasingly deterritorialized signs, figures schizzes, that are no longer either figurative or structured, and reproduce or produce an interplay of phenomena without aim or end. Science as experimentation, as previously defined. In this domain, as in the others, isn't there a properly libidinal conflict between a paranoiac Oedipalizing element of science and a schizo-revolutionary element? That very conflict that leads Lacan to say there exists a drama for the scientist. He quotes here, J.R. Meyer, Cantor, I will not draw up an honor roll of these dramas that sometimes lead to madness, a list that could not include itself in Oedipus unless it were to call Oedipus in question. End quote. since, in point of fact, Oedipus does not intervene in these dramas as a familial figure or even as a mental structure. Its intervention is determined by an axiomatic acting as an Oedipalizing factor, resulting in a specifically scientific Oedipus. And in contrast to Lautremont's song that rises up around the paranoiac Oedipal narcissistic pole, oh, rigorous mathematics, arithmetic, algebra, geometry, imposing trinity, luminous triangle. There's another song, oh, schizophrenic mathematics, uncontrollable and mad desiring machines. Philosophy of science is going to be fun. I will do my best to make my way through this. There's a lot said here, and again, I'm not Mr. Science. Shocking, I know. Skull Knight says, is the process of connecting and creating relations a synonym with desire? Not a synonym, that's the activity of desire itself. And again, not desire that you have. Oh, I desire this. That's personal desire. These are better said as the impulses, the pre-personal impulses that make you up. Desire is the idea of Nietzschean will, libidinal thrust, the forces, however you may want to talk about that. But they're all at once. Yeah, that'd be the phrasing. So let's do it. Pull up the notes. And the same will be said of science. The this one's actually flows. Decoded flows of knowledge are first bound in the properly scientific axiomatics, but these axiomatics express a bipolar hesitation. Bound, linked is probably better here. Bound, they're tied to, they're linked to. Knowledge are first linked to. The decoded flows is what they're talking about here. This is the way that art works, and they just went through, and again, Deleuze has a lot of work on art as a thing. But the way art functions, the art analysis from the previous 2 paragraphs that we spent the last 3 weeks going over, just sorry, I was looking through the French. It's flux de cause de connaissance. There are scientific discoveries that are outside of traditional codes, traditional territories. And I'm not talking about just like string theory or any of that shit here. This is not the setup. Think instead about something even more simple, the microwave. The idea of waves or energy being able to be passed as such is something we take for very much granted now in a lot of different ways. But as it was being learned, as people were discovering radiation, as people were discovering the generation of waves or electromagnetic waves, these things, they work outside of traditional codes and understandings and the way things operate. They're knowledge that is free from the systematic constraints that existed prior to it. These flux, this shift, this newness, then becomes bound within scientific axiomatics. Right? The scientific axiomatics, and we'll get through kind of what those are, but for the most part, they're like formal systems of science or ways science is done, methodologies of science, theoretical frameworks that organize scientific knowledge. For really good writing on this, Bruno Latour is pretty exceptional these days. Worth reading. Laboratory Life, which kind of carries forward a lot of this. But the thing about scientific axiomatics and how they work is they don't, like all axiomatics, they don't just simply neutralize this flux. That would be pointless. That would be very much against the needs that capital has for things. And also, it wouldn't really operate very well. Instead, instead of that neutralization, what it does is it, again, has these two poles, the paranoiac and the schiz, just like art, just like you, just like me, just like society, everything, right? And there's a hesitation. The axiomatics express a bipolar hesitation because there is a tension within science to both be captured and used, but also to escape that and to experiment. This is true across the board, scientific discoveries overall. I don't understand Lacan sees desire as lack of desire, something to experience, because none of this has to do with desire you experience. None of it, even Lacan, has nothing to do with desire you experience. It's a fundamental misreading of desire. It's one of the challenges. When we use the word desire, it's one of the reasons I tend towards Klosowski's impulses. But even then, people personalize it. It's not about your desire. It's not about your impulses. Here, it is not about your knowledge, your axiom. Like, this is not, it's not a your thing. You don't exist, not in a meaningful sense. Instead, the way that the social order operates at large is determinant of these things. It is building out and conditioning desire, the impulses, and all the rest of this to these points. So, with science, specifically, someone goes and does experiments. And I'm not talking about some flat earther on Reddit. I'm talking about, like, actually scientists in some place somewhere doing some dumb shit. There's lots of dumb shit happening everywhere. There is, inside of that, a really odd way science gets pulled. Obviously, their goal there is to try to discover something new. But it's generally not something new and useless. Even if it kind of comes as something that is, like aerogel, which will just 2 weeks away from happening, don't worry, or whatever the fuck else, pick some weird fucking discovery. There has to be fusion. There has to be fusion's one of them. There are so many ways people could go discover and do whatever. But there has to be a bend. Everything bends back towards the needs of capital, towards the needs of the social system at large. But science, like art, despite bending that way, also bends the other way because it is about experimentation. Science that happens within totalitarian regimes doesn't have the same sort of open-endedness. It doesn't have the same drive towards breaking things or finding out something new. These two things are diametrically opposed. Breaking out, doing something new, having no goal, versus this is captured by capital, blah, blah, blah. But nothing exists as either of these. That's not how things work. Instead, the process of it oscillates between the two sides. And ultimately, capital wins, or eventually wins. It may go around a long, long curve. And this is what they're talking about here. The two poles, the hesitation that happens here, the two poles. They say, and this is a long bit we're going to have to go through because it's just a long paragraph. This is a long sentence. It's just a long sentence because this, as we go through, the thing to know as we go through this is the paranoiac reactionary pole. This is the great social axiomatic that he's talking about here, that he's writing about here. This is the way that the great social aggregate treats science and how science reacts to it. He writes, one of the poles is the great social axiomatic that retains from science what must be retained in terms of market needs and zones of technical innovation. The great social aggregate that makes the scientific sub-aggregates into so many applications that are characteristic of and that correspond to it. In short, none of this is short, the set of methods that is not content to bring scientists back to reason, but anticipates any deviance on their part, imposes a goal on them, and makes scientists and science into an agency perfectly subjugated to the formation of sovereignty. For example, the way in which non-determinism, tolerated, blah, blah, blah. This is the way scientific engineering, development, discoveries bends back towards the needs of capital, which it does. The relationship is hierarchical up front. The capitalist society, as they use the terms, treats these scientific sub-aggregates as applications to serve its purpose. This is the language of set theory, which is really, really important to Deleuze, by the way. Yay for the math people excited to finally use their degree in philosophy. But that's incredibly important because capitalism organizes scientific research as these elements within the larger structure. There aren't a lot of scientists just going off and discovering whatever. Everything comes back to how it can be applied for capital. The great example, I always love this, is where people talk about Tesla versus Edison. Edison, this capitalist who just fucking ruined Tesla's life, and Tesla, this wild, wacky guy who did whatever, who absolutely did everything. Hey. Thank you, Simone. That's 13 months. God, we've had memberships for a while. You can always join as a member as well. Tesla built everything he did for the state, for money, for society at large. You hear this from scientists quite often. They're building for something. They're building in service of something. Because this is, again, how capital focuses these things. It's not that scientific deviance is rejected. That's not the idea. That's not how anything works in capital. It's not rejecting deviance. Capital needs deviance, and it anticipates it. Prévient in French, which means it prevents and anticipates, which is kind of a standing ahead, but it doesn't stop it. That's not the setup here. It has goals that it imposes, which means that science is, generally speaking, done as part of an agenda, as part of a drive for the sovereign power, right? So, this, and they end with their like line of an example, which I think is, it's a commentary more than an actuality. This is not really a comment within science, but more of a comment on how science has become accepted. When with quantum mechanics, we kind of eliminate the idea of a determinist universe. It just kind of on its face, for a lot of reasons, does. Just get rid of that shit. It's just fucking gone. But when it happened, it emerged through this space of the 20s and 30s. And what ended up happening is that they were pushed to make peace, to find a way towards a compatibilism. And they did this through a lot of sort of odd theories, wave interpretations, whatever it may be. It bent back around. It bends back around. It doesn't just destroy determinism as a whole. It's also not non-determinate. It has another conversation. But that's not a thing we want to have. Instead, there's a reason that people have this really weird mental space that quantum mechanics, once someone sees anything, that's it. Just a person has to see it. And it's like, that's not really how, it's not really what they're talking about, but okay. That's not really what they're talking about, but okay. Because at that point, we can put it into the way that we traditionally have understood the world and how it works and how these things work in macro scale applications. The shift for science is wacky, wild thing, but then bent around. And it's the sort of thing that sort of drives underneath that. That's the one pole. Capital money that, as the new socius, replaced previous formations, the despotic especially, and utilizes the way that science operates towards goals and controlling its direction. However, science isn't just purely that, as much as STEM lords would really, really like that. Not the case, as they say. But the other pole is the schizoid, in whose proximity flux of knowledge schizophrenize, not only flee across the social axiomatic, but pass beyond their own axiomatics, generating increasingly deterritorialized signs, figures, schizs, that are no longer either figurative or structured, and reproduce or produce an interplay of phenomena without aim or end. Science is experimentation as previously defined. Yeah, Rudd says, Schrodinger's thought experiments have led to more misunderstandings than understandings. Well, Schrodinger's thought experiment, like the great irony is it wasn't a thought experiment like to like prove or explain quantum mechanics. He was making fun of quantum mechanics with it. Like that's like the whole joke. So what? The fucking cat's alive and dead at the same time was basically what he's saying. He's like, that's fucking stupid because it is. Because that's dumb. That's not what quantum mechanics is. And so he was making fun of it. And the hilarious part is that's literally the thing that's used to explain it to people, which is magic, as far as I'm concerned. Like, humanity is wonderful. What a strange, strange group. Yeah, Phil says, it's like all these headlines. Scientists discover thing that confirms thing that is a recent popular social trend. Yeah. Yeah. And even then when they don't, and it's like, oh, they've discovered this thing that could destroy everything. I'm not talking about AI. Fuck off with that. Hey, quantum computers, and they get to a certain qubit. Actually, we've proven that cryptography will go away. Not anymore. Like it's a really, these things undo each other. They play, they work as they do. And there's nothing you can do because, and they say, am I drinking from the pot? Isn't that a great teacup? It's Jack from the server got this for me technically got it for my wife, Heather. But it's a coffee pot. I use it for tea. It makes me look really big, but it's actually, to me, a normal size coffee cup, so it works out. But the other pole is the schizide pole, in whose proximity flux of knowledge schizophrenize. The phrasing here is really... Is it doing that right now? Where is it? Is it still running? Or is this earlier? The latest update to OBS broke my auto translation, which is probably okay because 2 or 3 times apparently I've said the N word and it's put it on screen. I didn't notice. So I've had to delete a couple VODs because it's not the best transcription. I thought that was funny. I didn't realize it was going to make me say racist shit. Computers. Is that up there right now, Brad? The transcription I thought was helpful in general, but it broke, so I'm waiting for the next version to show up. And it's going to take some time to set up. I can do that today. That'll be fine. This next little bit is talking about the schizoid revolutionary pole. Pole, like magnetic pole, polar, right? The one pole than the other. They're flux of the vibration between them, the way that energy flows, blah, 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 blah. That's the phrasing they're using. In the proximity of this pole, right? So it's things are around, like oscillating. Proximity to this pole is, how to put it? The way that mathematical language almost operates itself outside the frame. Good. The way math, like language works, there isn't really identity here, but it's got a nearness near this pole. The phrasing is just great. So we have the flux of the impulses of the scientists or scientific change or whatever it is. They kind of are going between them, and they flee on this side across the social axiomatic. They aren't part of the capture system of capital. They pass beyond the axiomatics, transcending even their own scientific systems as new proofs are required and as they break as we understand things. we've had this, there's a lot of these things happening over the last decade in various disciplines of science, and it's kind of amazing. And I'm too stupid to fully understand any of them. But when we get to the point where we start to realize that the universe actually might be older than we thought because we get a reading and we've measured it and we've triple measured it, we've checked, and it's like, oh, that actually nullifies all of our understandings of everything. And then everyone's kind of like, oh, shit. And then they have to kind of jump and do it again. They've got to figure it out. This happens more often than we really fully grasp within different sort of sub-disciplines and within all sorts of things. We people on the outside in the social world, we just kind of keep going about our day despite, the grounding that we thought we had completely being obliterated. It's a constantly changing, constantly shifting. We used to believe, and I know my parents come from a generation who believe that you actually could work out your immune system, that actually getting sick made it stronger, which is a misunderstanding fundamentally of the complementary system and how it works and how our immune system functions. But as we were doing measurements and readings, that's how we understood it. And it backed our understanding of the rest of the things, that working a strong workout, work makes stronger. But it's like, that's not how it works. Actually, that's not how the immune system operates. So, and there's a reason we don't teach kids this now, actually, because of the same thing. It doesn't really fit into the narrative social story we really, really, really love. There's a lot of that shit. Because it's a radical movement we're talking about here. This isn't purely escaping control. In fact, this is not about escaping control. There is no aim to escape control. It just has escaped because it is just doing whatever the fuck it's doing. That's the nature of the scientific method as a thing. Wait, entropy isn't real? German protest work ethic isn't a universal law? That's pretty fucking accurate, actually. That's pretty much what, this is what they're talking about. Is these things break as we understand the world. They go, oh, actually, this doesn't do the thing we thought. AI is actually a fascinating one for this. LLMs are, I think, an almost miracle of computer engineering. They are not intelligent in any meaningful sense of the word, in any capacity. None of these systems are. But they're incredibly powerful prediction engines. They're like astonishingly powerful. But there's this weird thing. Instead of like handling them like prediction engines, we need to make them into something that fits how we understand the rest of the social world to work and ourselves to work. And so we recapture it. We recapture it as, oh, this is intelligence. This is clearly exactly what people are. It's not. But we like to think that a lot of the jobs that are out there require very specific predictive memories, that people can learn them over time. We don't understand all the nuances that go into every single job. And as such, it fits the larger story. It doesn't in reality, but that's, function of how it works. Yeah, humans are dumb fucks. What can I say? But here, go ahead.
When you said that, like specifically the scientific, sub-aggregate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, does this kind of like what you said, about AI, like, does this kind of like relate to the paranoid machine in any semblance?
Yes.
Right? Where you have like and when I mention paranoid machine, I'm not mentioning an individual or something like that, but I'm mentioning a social production.
So let's talk through how we get to LLMs, because LLMs didn't like spring up out of nowhere. What happened is people have been for decades, like outside of my lifetime, people have been trying to build a machine that works like the human mind. This is not new. And as they've done various parts of this, they've tried to make hardware that works like neurons. They've tried to make connections that operate like that. And as they're developing that, that's their goal. Their goal is to replace labor. That's literally their goal. It's exceptionally codified, axiomatized thing. Replace labor and thought labor and head towards that, our understanding of what thinking is. They don't understand what thinking is, but that's a whole other problem. So as they're doing this and as they're going, they actually, this goal, we want to make humans, we want to replace them. Now, along the way, they do little things because, again, this exists in decades. So we're talking about, even if it's 3 months of research into, say, Transformers, as an example, not the cartoon or the toy, Transformers as in the hardware and methodology for how LLMs sort of operate now. They did that as an efficiency play, but that's not really what they did it for. Someone came up with Transformers as this other thing. It's not related to replacing. It has nothing to do with replacing labor. It was sort of this own kind of cool invention on its own. Same with attention mechanisms and GAN and fucking noise, the stable diffusion models. All these things were sort of discovered randomly on their own by people working in these fields, but sort of not really as part of that directed thing. And then it goes this way towards that pole. Oh shit, we got this crazy, what the fuck? Okay, bend it back. That's because it's this. This is the oscillation that they're talking about that's constantly happening. And so LLMs developed out of a lot of random sort of secondary odd things that came out of the process of studying and aiming. This is what this funding is for. This is what you're working towards. You're working towards bettering humanity. You're working towards replacing labor, making it so everyone can, have fully automated gay communism. That's what we're heading towards, whatever the fuck. But as they're doing it, these other things just happened because they don't have a goal. They don't really have an aim. This is true kind of in almost all of the great discoveries of all time. They don't really set out, okay, I'm gonna invent a transistor. That's not what happens. They get a flash of a thing they can make. They're building, they're working, multiple people to come together. They make a thing, but it's not like we're going to do it to solve this problem. The problem solving, the application comes later in the line. Jimbo says, no one thinks photo recognition technology is intelligent. Jimbo, I want to live in your world where you don't know that there are people who I've argued with on artificial intelligence who believe that the AI looks at photos. I'm just going to end the sentence there. I'm so sorry, Jimbo. They think photo recognition technology is intelligent. They exist. They think AI, your computer looks at photos. Like, looks at them. Not reads the data, but looks at them. Sorry, I'll never forget that argument. Sorry, but that's the idea. So like, it's the process of capitalism doesn't get rid of or eliminate what science can do, because science is going to do what it's going to do. It's its own self-relational process. It's the pure language of mathematics and science and experimentation doesn't have also here's the social order. That's not the setup. These things do what they're doing. It's why the archetype of the mathematician who's solving one of these, one of those fucking problems that no one knows, or we need to solve this to fix mathematics, or these people are all way on the periphery. And when I mean that, I mean mentally and socially and everything. They're way out there. They're doing their own thing because they're not doing it for this. However, these things get applied. They get taken into those things. And that bend happens back in order to basically utilize all of it. Again, capital anticipates. It prevents through anticipation, imposing goals on scientists as it goes in advance, making science an agency perfectly subjugated to sovereignty. But that's really particular here. And again, a thing we deal with, I think, they're solving mathematics. I mean, that's it. You've seen the you've seen the clips, right, Red? Of people who claim they're doing this. It's this is where we get into like the thing that just makes me exasperated as a thing. The one theory to rule them all, like because they all watched too much Lord of the Rings while they fell asleep and then they forgot that they weren't doing physics, they were just reading a book. Just makes me tired.
So what's the remedy of like we read in like in art that is art should be experimental, but what about science, like without aim, like what they prescribe in the previous section, right?
Oh, they're not saying art should be
science.
They're not saying art should be experimental. They're also not saying science should be. They're saying you can't help it. Ha ha ha. That this is the function. This is the function all the way down of a social order that is within anything purely self-relational, which is kind of their argument all the way down, that we have a series of self-relational interactions all the way down. Art isn't out to change the world. That would be a goal. It's literally out doing art. Art's doing its thing. Now, art gets bent back. Capital overall, like, there's all these pockets of shit happening, science and art, and this guy's writing a book over here, and it's everything. Capital is suffused because, again, it's a self-relational social order within everything. Any two connections, any two things, it's self-relational. It's not outside of it. You're not dealing with a teleology or a hierarchy where it's like, oh, the king determines my meaning. The meaning is found in the self-relation between any two things. But also, with that, everything bends because there is a hierarchy. It is still state power. It is still capital. It is still the wealthy all the way down. So as such, art is going to do its thing and also be captured. Science is going to do its thing and also be captured. Philosophy is going to do its thing and also be captured. There's nothing you can do to stop the latter, but there's also nothing capitalism can do to stop the former, nor does it want to, honestly, I think is part of their argument. It's just this is the nature of how art operates fundamentally. And as they make their way through, they say the other pole, right? The other pole that we're talking about, the schizoid, they go on. In this domain, as in the others, isn't there a properly libidinal conflict between a paranoiac Oedipalizing element of science and a schizo-revolutionary element? This is the explicit statement that we're not talking about a sociological conflict, an epistemological conflict. This is libidinal. This is unconscious. This is pre-personal. This is direct investment in these scientific formulations, just as it was within the artistic. This is desiring production as science, within science, that they're talking about here. These poles, the one operating through paranoid investment, where unity is the primacy, that totalization is part of it, that hierarchy is expected and organized. And what this does is Oedipalizes science. This subjects it to a transcendent authority or direction or intention. You're doing this for the good of humanity in this particular way at this particular time. We don't think that, but that's part of the thing. It's like, oh my God, I've invented flight. This will be amazing. People will be able to travel the world. And we'll be able to have industry. And we'll be able to see it like that's not, they're inventing, they're just doing it because they can, but then sovereignty is part of it. The name of the Father transposed to institutionalized structure, basically. But on the other pole, it is libidinally invested in dispersion, the breakdown, the multiplication, the deterritorialization, that which exceeds capture. And they have the phrase here that in this domain, as in the others, this is art, this is philosophy, this is everything else. There's no difference. It's the same libidinal polarization across all decoded flux within capital. It's everything. They're just, in these places, in these categories, we are able to, in my opinion, I think in theirs, more easily see, oh, if art works that way, art's not that special. Art's special in what it does, but art's not like a thing that like, oh my God, everyone who's not doing art doesn't break through capital. That's not, but it's the process made explicit in scientific communities, the process made explicit. Scientists and how they go about their thing and how they go about their shit. It's the process made explicit. That's, I think, what the section is. This is the whole point of the setup here. And they say, that very conflict leads Lacan to say there exists a drama for the scientist. Lacan, everyone knows my favorite thing is to discuss anything from Macretes. Good Christ. And we did pull this out last time, so I have in my notes, this is page 870, if you want to go read Macretes, which no one wants to, and no one should, ever. This is the drama of the scholar or academic, not really the drama of the scientist. The scientist, that's the American English word that they've added here. The actual phrase is the dramas du savant, the scholar. It means scientist as well, but it has, we in the West tend to think of scientists as lab coat guys sitting there, but that's not the scientist they're referring to. That's more or less labor, specialized labor, but they're talking about the scholar, the academic side of the theoreticians, the people at that cutting edge, the savant, which in French is very particular. For Lacan, these people in these spaces, and there's, again, it's not just lab coats, it's people, the savants, the scholars, the academics at these cutting edges. This is not a drama of metaphor, okay? It is the actual toll of the libidinal internal conflict that savants experience. There is a split between the Oedipalizing pressure, which is the institutional demand. It literally talk to anyone in academia or in any capacity, and you'll hear this. Oh, I've got to fucking manage all my students. Oh, I've got to keep this going all the time. Oh my God, I've got to publish so many things. Oh my God, I can't just do my fucking studies. That demand from the institutional, the demand from funding structures, which is its own nightmare, the demands of peer review, the way that there is some level, as much as everyone wants to be completely unique, the reality is there is a conformity to the way that the scholarly systems operate. One side. The other side of the split is the schizo-revolutionary impulse. Following a fucking, getting a wild hair up your ass and chasing some weird shit down. Like, it's like, oh, what if, blup, off you go. These two things, this conflict, this drama within knowledge, as Estelle points out, savant comes from savoir, which means to understand. The drama within learning about things or discovering things or the creating new figures, concepts, art, whatever it is. This drama is libidinal conflict described. It's not external to all of this. This is the very constituting of the existence of the savant as a thing. And that's what he's driving at. And so then he goes into they go into the Lacan quote here, and they add a little bit of commentary over it. Meyer and Cantor, Meyer and Cantor, both experience severe mental breakdowns. And Lacan is basically talking about how it's very common for these titans of scientific, mathematical, abstract, scholarly creation to completely have their minds lost. That leads to madness. That's like the whole point for Lacan here. Is that the scientists go fucking nuts eventually. I mean, we see this. We don't call it that, but there's a lot of scientists who really should be put out to pasture who end up losing their shit at some point or another. Because it's... But they add, and it's probably a more complex critique because Lacan is still very much within this sort of Oedipalized framework. They add this phrase that all of this could not include itself in Oedipus unless it were to call Oedipus into question. And what it means is that, like, Oedipus, if Oedipus were to hold on to or be able to be the container for these madnesses, if we had these scientific psychoses in Oedipus, we would have to radically question what Oedipus fundamentally is, because Oedipus doesn't carry these things. Oedipus is mommy, daddy, me, not the scientific struggle of not the scientific struggle of the academic fighting for his work and dealing with all of these two sides, that I want to do crazy new things and also I have to be built in. The strain within that, that's not within Oedipus. That doesn't work. We'd have to fundamentally rediscover what Oedipus is, which is what Lacan is trying to do effectively. The discourse of the academic, as an example. He's trying to do that, but that's their point. That's their entire point. Oedipus doesn't work as a familial figure within the scientific community. As it's not how it happens. It doesn't work as a mental structure here. This isn't the triangular scientific organization, right? Instead, how Oedipus works is here it intervenes under the guise of an axiomatic as an Oedipalizing factor. So the social axiomatic itself, which is Capital's system of organizing the flux, decoded flux. I almost said flux decode. I need to stop looking at the French. That's going to give me a fucking problem. The social axiomatic itself here, right? And we're driving at functions as Oedipalizing agency. It subjects, hierarchizes, and imposes limits. And with this, we end up with the result, a scientifically built Oedipus, specifically scientific Oedipus. This is not a projection of familial romance, mother, father, me, but instead Oedipus as the structural subjugation of scientific flux to social axiomatic. Yeah. Yeah. And then there is, because why not reference everything that's awesome? If you haven't read Lautremont's Chants de Maldoror, you should. It's awesome. Fucking awesome. But that's what he's talking about here. Lautremont wrote this insane, I mean, genuinely insane fucking book. I don't know how else to put it. That has in it a hymn to mathematics that sort of mocks it, which is the idea. It's a whole thing. They're making fun of it here. And Lautremont isn't exactly far away. And they're ending with their counter song to it, where they again say the same thing. Oh, schizophrenic mathematics, uncontrollable, mad, deterritorialism machine. Mathematics as experimentation. Cantor had transfinite numbers, which wasn't a thing that made sense to anyone really prior to him. Gödel gave us the incompleteness theorem, which completely breaks an extraordinary amount of abstract thought prior to him. And also still, most people I don't think have a grasp of it. Riemannian geometry is non-Euclidean. Non-Euclidean geometry in video games saw a huge surge a little bit ago, but there's like way beyond that as a thing. We've got category theory, which our lovely friend Kent Palmer dedicated a lot of his time to, our friend who did the Continental Philosophy server. Kent's great. And you've got a photo of Jeff Goldblum with chaos theory. All of these things are great examples of productions that exceed and transform the axiomatics that they were built on. That's how they're set up. If you haven't read, have you not read Chants de Maldoror? Let me see if I have my... I may not have it here. I Doesn't look like it. I don't have a digital copy. Highly recommend it. Highly recommend it. Genius flirts with insanity. Insanity. Yes. One sec. I'll just get you a copy. Give me a minute. One moment. Maldoror. It is, if you have any part of you enjoys, I don't know how to put it. If any part of you enjoys, odd horror, views of the world, there's a lot inside of it. There's a lot inside of it that I think is worth, reading. And there it is. Good. Got it. Les Chances de Maldoror from Lautréamont. It's up there with what's one of the more, like, I would say influential books that people don't know about. I'd probably say that. I think that's a safe bet, actually. All right. I think the next page is more interesting. I'm not going to disagree here. This is going to be a lot. It's going to be a lot. All right. Does anyone have anything on this before I move forward to the next paragraph? Because it's a bear, and this is going to be the rest of the reading, probably, for today.
I do have a little thing.
Please.
Yeah, because I have Le Chant de Maldoror in my bookshelf, so I got it out. And in the preface, it says on the first page, the structuralist movement of the 60s, as we well remembered, declared the death of the author. I advise you to direct your attention to this text, and then it just goes on to explain how he did all of that long before. It is a really interesting book.
It's Blanchot called it a vertigo of reading, and I think that's not a terrible way to put it. It's not. The Champs de Maldoror is not a normal read, and I think it's important that people do not go into it thinking that it's a normal read. I mean, nothing I recommend is probably going to be normal, but when I say not a normal read, I mean this is like the founding of surrealism. And it's not even like what I would say is like top tier surrealism. It's just the one that's like, oh, that's it. That's it. This is the most surreal shit that's ever been written. And everything is sort of derivative of it, which is kind of hilarious. God, it's good. Let's see. I'm looking up, just have it up, and it's like, how can one be beautiful as a chance encounter of a sewing machine and an umbrella on a dissection table? I don't even know what that means. Yeah, there's a, if you can find physical copies, there's a few where people have actually gone through and actually drawn out that you'll, as you're reading, you'll go, oh, this is absolutely the inspiration behind thing X. Like Pan's Labyrinth basically comes straight out of it. It's a lot of shit does. It's kind of amazing. A lot of stuff you'll recognize. It's really good. It's really worth reading. But so is Anti-Oedipus. So we're going to keep reading it. We're going to keep trying at least. This is all, okay. We're in capital. So finally we're making the move and doing the thing. It's about fucking time, I guess. What a shock. Fuck. I'm just going to read it. I can't even pre-explain. But this is, again, we're nearing very much the end of the book. So they're starting to really get into, like, we're here. We've got there to there. So we got like 8 pages fucking left, if you can imagine it. I know. So as we do that, and then we make our way through, we're starting to get to the end of all the points. So just be ready for that. Cool? Cool. In the capitalist formation of sovereignty, the full body of capital money as the socius, the great social axiomatic has replaced the territorial codes and the despotic overcodings that characterized the preceding formations, and a molar, gregarious aggregate has formed, whose mode of subjugation has no equal. We have seen on what foundations this aggregate operated, a whole field of eminence that is reproduced on an always larger scale, that is continually multiplying its axioms to suit its needs, that is filled with images and with images of images, through which desire is determined to desire its own repression, imperialism. An unprecedented decoding and deterritorialization, which institutes a combination as a system of differential relations between the decoded and deterritorialized flux, in such a way that social inscription and repression no longer even need to bear directly upon bodies and persons, but on the contrary, precede them. Axiomatic, regulation, and application. A surplus value determined as a surplus value of flux, whose extortion is not brought about by a simple arithmetical difference between two quantities that are homogeneous and belong to the same code, but precisely by differential relations between heterogeneous magnitudes that are not raised to the same power. A flux of capital and a flux of labor is human surplus value in the industrial essence of capitalism. A flux of financing and a flux of payment or incomes in the monetary inscription of capitalism. A market flux and a flux of innovation as a machinic surplus value in the operation of capitalism. Surplus value as the first aspect of its immanence. A ruling class that is all the more ruthless as it does not place the machine in its service, but is the servant of the capitalist machine. In this sense, a single class, content for its part with drawing incomes that, however enormous, differ only arithmetically from the worker's wages income, whereas the class functions on a more profound level as creator, regulator, and guardian of the great non-appropriated, non-possessed flux, incommensurable with wages and profits, which marks at every step along the way the interior limits of capitalism, their perpetual displacement, and their reproduction on an always larger scale. The movement of interior limits as the second aspect of the capitalist field of eminence, defined by the circular relationship great flux of financing reflux, of incomes in wages afflux of raw profit. Fuck me, goddamn it. The effusion of anti-production within production as the realization or the absorption of surplus value in such a way that the military, bureaucratic, and police apparatus finds itself grounded in the economy itself, which directly produces libidinal investments for the repression of desire, anti-production as the third aspect of capitalist immanence, expressing the twofold nature of capitalism, production for production's sake, but under the conditions of capital. Remember when I said everything's coming together? Like this is the paragraph? God damn it. We're going to have to take this bit by bit. As we do, don't hesitate to type something out, because there's a good chance you're not going to understand half of this, because you probably shouldn't. I expect almost no one to. I'm not sure I do, and you'll find out if I do as we go. We open. In the capitalist formation of sovereignty, which is the full body of capital money as the socius. Remember, we went through full body versus body without organs. The great social axiomatic has replaced the territorial codes and the despotic overcodings that characterize the preceding formations and a molar gregarious aggregate has formed whose mode of subjugation has no equal. Yes, it's jargon, but it's all jargon they've been using this entire time and building towards. So let's do it bit by bit by bit. Up front, the formation of sovereignty is, to them, as they're referring to capital, and they are here, is specific as a historical mode of social organization. How we work together, how things are done, how we decide stuff. It is not that you have miraculously existed in a way where you've decided the job you've had, the place you were born, all of that. No. Socially, things are determined, built, set up, and organized. And you work within this. You are within this. You are built up within this. So socially, there is a large-scale social organization that operates in a particular way, a specific way. They then say the full body as capital, money as the socius. Good Christ. When we talk about the socius as the BWO, we're talking about it as an unproductive surface that appears as the source of production. The way that we talk about capital, money, capital, investment, capital cash, as the creator of jobs, as the thing that determines what happens, right? Land isn't what does it. Land used to be what does it. It's not really power directly that what does it. Power used to be what does it. The king and sovereignty directly invested in a single body. It's not what happens anymore. Instead, capital's kind of moving. It's doing its thing, and it is determining. Seems to be determining. Seems to be determining. Seems to be the source of jobs, of food, of why we do things. All of that. This is the socius as things. Because money isn't just simply circulating. It's not that easy. Money becomes the social body itself under capitalism. It is the recording service for production. As production happens, good or bad, money moves from one spot to another. We literally record in capital. Oh, you have this much money. That's how productive you are. That you lost this much money. It's how much you've lost. It's a beautiful cover of La Chance de Maldoror. Goddamn. This is the thing they're driving towards. Money just doesn't circulate. This isn't, oh, it just happens to, and then people are, no. It is the social body. It is the recording surface. Through capital, everything is recorded and determined. Right? This is Marx. This is Marx. This is Marx as a thing. Capital is a quasi-cause from which production seems to emanate. It seems that when people invest money in a factory, it makes a lot of things. That's crazy. Wow, look how much money they put into it, and now it's doing all that. No. It's not really how it works, but it does seem to. It's important here. That's a big deal because the vibe of it is kind of a big fucking huge deal here, to say the least, right? Because previous social systems, the primitive territorial inscribing socius, utilized codes, hardline codes. Then we moved from there to the despot, the overarching singular point, the transcendent inscriber, who overcoded. But capitalism does away with those. It utilizes axiomatics, okay? And they work very differently. If there is anything you pull from this book, this really should be one of the big ones. Codes that we got through the original primitive man. They are qualitative inscriptions that occurred on bodies. There may be noises attached to them, sounds, language, all of that. Not the point. Codes were written in bodies or on land. We recorded in the land our existence. And then the king came along and the king overcoded everything. It had a transcendent signifier. The king says, and that just did all of it. It reshifted everything. But axiomatics work differently. It's a quantitative system of abstract internal relations that indefinitely can add to itself. These are the three elements of the sort of three social aggregates. This is all in this paragraph, this one sentence, by the way. The great social axiomatic replaced territorial codes, despotic overcodings that characterize proceeding, and a molar gregarious aggregate has formed. Molar is a statistical size. It just means at large. Oh, at large, people have two eyes. At large, people have two legs, two arms. At large. It's statistically large scale, organized, versus the molecular. They use the term molar. It's a scientific term. It's a mole. A mole is a statistic volume of a thing. That's it. It's just put together as a thing. It's a. They use the term. They will use the term a lot. Herd. Nietzsche uses the term the herd mentality, but this is the herd-like mass formation of things. The aggregate doesn't simply organize subjects. That's not really the way to think of it. It produces subjects as statistical mass. So a molar gregarious aggregate formed, whose mode of subjugation has no equal. Capitalism isn't power or fear inscribed in the body that represses. It's not repressing through overt political power. It's not really how it functions. Instead, it's so deep into us. It's so deep into us and so pervasive in the way that it functions. It is almost impossible to resist the core function of. The subjugation has no equal. That's one fucking sentence. God damn this fucking book. Do you think we lost sovereign independence of production and capital? I don't think there was ever sovereign independence of production. I'd have to understand what you mean, Simone. They go on. We have seen on what foundations this aggregate operated. Again, the gregarious aggregate. They say first, a whole field of eminence that is reproduced on an always larger scale, that is continually multiplying its axioms to suit its needs, that is filled with images and with images of images, through which desire is determined to desire its own repression. Is this why Hart and Negre have their view in empire as a decentralized eminent system, not like old imperialism? A good amount of their understanding of that has to do with a fundamental misunderstanding of feudalism, because feudalism didn't exist, and they base a lot of their writings off of feudal ideas. Like techno-feudalism as a thing, like we're literally inventing it as we're coming up with it and justifying it retroactively as though it was a historical reality when it never was. Yay! All right, so the foundations that this operates on. Capitalism. The field of eminence is the first one. The whole field of eminence is produced on an always larger scale. Because capitalism is always creating these, has created a self-enclosed field that has no external reference point. Think of it as the way that a painting or frame of a painting operates. It doesn't work the same way as the territorial, where things are coded by the earth and immediate consumption of desire there, or by despotic empires, where the transcendent sovereign sort of overdoes it. That's not how it works here. Capitalism's field is immanent, purely immanent. And because of that, everything operates within its own sort of quantitative relations at a fundamental level. And with this, these relations are forever reproduced on an always larger scale. They're expanded and reproduced. Say reproduce. Yeah. We know the old adage that capitalism must grow, number go up, right? It always has to incorporate more territory. It has to find a way to take on more labor, more resources. This scale expansion is not an accident of capitalism. This is structural. It's always reproducing itself at a larger scale. It is continually multiplying its axioms to suit needs. Capital develops axioms as we go, and we more or less help do this because the decoded flux of desire, the impulses of things or resistance, as they show up, capitalism is going to simply add new axioms that deal with them. It doesn't have a fixed code that simply blocks and destroys desire. It's not how this functions. It's able to take them and axiomatize them. So a great example would be, we have a rebellion in the early 1900s in various places, so let's have labor laws. Great. That labor laws found ways to actually recapture and empower labor workers, people like that, in order to have as an axiomatic the block over breakout. As labor realized, oh fuck, we are getting fucked. Well, let's fuck you less. Why don't we won't go in completely dry. Oh, okay, not completely dry. That sounds great. That axiomatic did that. This is how it sort of functioned. We have welfare state provisions. Get them while they're fun, because they're only lasting for so long. We have some level of consumer protections. All of these concessions of capital, and I should put concessions in like big quotes here. These are new axioms integrated into the system that are able to capture these bursts of everything as they go, and then, just keep moving. Just keep going. Because it does. It can always add another axiom. It doesn't give a fuck. It's never full. It's never too much. Even if we have a hilarious bureaucratic system where the laws are written and there's a lot of sort of wink, wink, nudge, nudge laws where we sort of vibe code it more or less in one way or another. That setup as capital's going. This happens at a fundamental level. The impulses are being sorted through these axiomatized sort of rules that never will stop. There's no reason for them to stop. And so this thing that happens is that desire isn't really repressed from the outside. Instead, desire ends up invested in the structures that create this axiomatization that represses desire. Workers want a fair wage. Now think about that. Like that's the sentence. I thought vibe overcoding was a good pun. Thank you. But think about it for a second. Workers demand a fair wage. Now, all of us, who's going to disagree with that? Are you going to disagree with that? No, I think it's great. We should totally have that. But isn't that, I'll disagree with that. I'm sure you would, 92. But that's the idea is, it would upend the system entirely if we just didn't have not just fair wages, fuck fair wages. Like, what if we just, made everything a fucking commune as an idea? I don't know how it would work. Don't really care. But more my point, hey, I deserve a fair wage. You know what? If I'm in Canada, I'm a citizen. I get free healthcare. I get healthcare. And you know what? As a worker, that's very good. Hey, I'm guaranteed to have X number of days off a week. That's very good. Workers demand these things. They desire and they come to be attracted to fair wages. Consumers come to, in the same way, desire, become attracted to commodities, purchasing these things. Again, not in the silly, overdone leftist meme of like, oh my God, consumer culture, but like all of us buy things. That's what it works. Citizens desire the state. Yes, workers, I had a company that did unlimited vacation. Is scumbags. Scumbags. It's awful. But all of this is just the mechanism of fascism and reactionary mass movements, because they're just giving axiomatics in order to sort of we exist, we're going through, and then there's little pressure valves that just burst, and their job is to duct tape over it. And it's here's an axiomatic for that, for this, for this. They can just keep going. There's no reason for them to ever stop. They just get to go and go and go and go. Yeah, they just get to keep going. And that's the first bit. Jesus Christ. Second thing. Growth for the sake of growth is the ideology of the cancer cell. Or life. Like fungus. Funguses grow for the sake of growth and survival. Like, there's a lot of things. Ants do this. Everything, like, growth for the sake of growth. No, and I get what you're saying, but more my point, and the thing underneath it is how we find ways to justify or narrativize our position or what's good or what we come to want is built by the very conditions and system. Human life is not the universal template of life. Crystals grow bigger. Stalactites and stalagmites grow bigger and bigger. Is it because of their ideology, or the underlying thing is in every moment, like we were just talking about with science and with art, that the two poles and the oscillations between them, between the for the system and for no reason, nonsense sense, you might say. You could say good sense to nonsense. The two poles of existence that we oscillate between, that all of our fluxions, the impulses fluctuate between and are sorted as such, the capturing of them inside of an axiomatic that gives them purpose feels good. We like having purpose. We all do. There's no one here who would not enjoy just finding that perfect, Brooks-shaped hole for me that I just slide right into and I get to work and I get to do my thing and that's great and I get to do that forever. All of you would enjoy it equally. We would love to find the cog position that we would be in order to just work. That's axiomatics work that way. We all are like that. No one's special. But they continue. This is like the second sort of clause they're going through here. And no, I phrased on purpose there, Rod. Besides, are we doing phrasing still? An unprecedented decoding and deterritorialization, which institutes a combination as a system of differential relations between the decoded and deterritorialized flux in such a way that social inscription and repression no longer even need to bear directly upon bodies and persons, but on the contrary, precede them. Axiomatic, regulation, and application. One sec. Which institutes a combination as a system. I'm going to argue that should be conjugation. It should be establish a conjugation there. Because it's not a combination. Combination's fucking super the wrong word. Conjugation is absolutely not combination. What's up, Raj?
Conjugaison.
Yeah, but I'm English and American, so I'm pronouncing it how I do. But it's not combination. Combination isn't the same thing as conjugation.
No, conjugaison is putting stuff together, like they're joining up.
They're joining up. It's also specifically the reason I also don't like that they say this. The reason that I think that they're putting in conjugation here is because it's the third synthesis. Like, they use very particular words throughout this whole fucking book. No?
Yeah.
So we'll go with that.
And one of the ways we use conjugaison in French is, when you all the different times of verbs, for example, and you conjugate them, so you instantialize them in regard to different contexts. In the sense that I am, you are, and that's present tense. Like, and I'm not going to talk about this, but you get the usage.
Yep. The three syntheses are connection, disjunction, conjugation. And it's very specific because the conjugation isn't just they're combined, which kind of implies that they're sort of just mushed together. And they're also not lost into each other, like where you pour, milk and chocolate together and get chocolate milk. It's kind of that, but it's that now they're combined into a single thing. It's more a linking, it's a different thing. It's a different setup. It's mathematical. They're actually talking more mathematically than anything here.
But I think that, if we use the tense, okay, it's the tenses in English. The tenses of verbs is this. The verb remains the same, but it changes in regard to the usage or the contingency of its use. So, and when you say conjugaison instead of combination, it's the whole difference between arrangement and assemblages. It's the whole thing. If you start switching those terms, you end up with less of a machinic understanding and more of a mechanic one. The mechanic understanding is joining parts together, gluing them together, and the arrangement side is to make them work together. So there's like a common becoming, if you want.
Yeah, and they're the institutes a combination versus instaurant une conjugation, or however the fuck you'd say it. Instantiating a conjugation. It's different. It's very different. Very frustrating. But specifically, we're talking in reference to how capitalism functions. You're always quiet and low, Raj. Sorry. You're always quiet. I have you turned up to 200% on Discord and you're still super quiet. Don't know what to tell you. Dualism versus codependent? No, versus coextensive. It's coextensive versus codependent. We'll get through this because I think in this we can actually reason through and sort of talk through and discuss. But they're opening up. They're talking here again about capitalism versus the two other society we've talked about in the book, right? So they open up unprecedented decoding and deterritorialization because previous societies had in some capacity, right? Like actual changes of code. This wasn't unusual. Things would be decoded. Previous societies would partially decode or deterritorialize. This would happen pretty normally. But capitalism has it as its fundamental function and operation. So we have the total destruction of anything qualitative. This is kinship systems, guild restrictions, religious prohibitions, and religious ceremonies, blah, 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 blah. Also the deterritorialize things. We might talk about the erasure of commons, the way that we now have a proletarian class rather than people sort of making a living. We have migratory patterns that are based not on people, but on quantitative elements as a thing. These are base level. So they say this institutes a conjugation. This is combined and built through very particular operations, conjugated in this way. It's a mathematical sense. They're related elements within a singular structure or arrangement. This is linguistic conjugation. Don't, which is a conjugative, right? This is just the basics, the contraction, the conjugation within linguistics, the way that these things work. They're systematic, pre-linking, in a structure, but they really require a sort of layout in a very particular way within themselves. And this is the thing about capitalism. To bring it back, capitalism is about those internal relations. Remember when we were talking about art just a couple paragraphs ago? And he's like, hey, when you know how paintings, once upon a time, paintings kind of existed in the world. They were more or less just decorative and related to a bunch of stuff. And then there's this weird movement that happened that they talked about a few pages ago, where in the frame, things kind of only refer to themselves or each other. Their internal relations are everything. That internal relations, which kind of was always there, when they're not going to say otherwise, but is revealed through capitalism. This is everything now. Everything now is this internal relationship, but it's not everything related to everything. It's within the system, these odd little system of differential relations. Instead of coded qualitative relations, codes, right? Capitalism instead builds differential relations between things that are drastically incompatible. Me doing a stream, I will run a few ads and I will get 26 cents. That's how much I make. I make very little doing these fucking streams, but I'll make 26 cents. That 26 cents I can then go and pay my water bill with, which I'm able to buy water with. So this stream that I'm doing is the same as water that I'm paying for drinking and bathing in. That's insane. That's fucking nuts. But this is the thing, that we have a quantitative variation and differential relation between things that are able to be done this way. This is really a weird setup. The heterogeneous elements within things and their value are always able to become commensurably exchanged thanks to capital, thanks to everything being able to relate to everything else. Yeah, I think that's probably how I'd phrase it. Yeah.
And is my sound better now? I switched mics.
You're still very quiet, but sure.
Okay, I'm trying my best.
You're fine. People can hear you. I boosted you the fuck up, so you're fine.
Okay. So 92 just posted, the English definition of conjugate. See, and that's the difference. In French, it does not necessarily mean to be combined with or joined to reversibly. In French, when we say something like conjuguer nos forces, like to conjugate our forces, and that's how it's understood mainly. And it's like rope pulling. Rope pulling, you get together and you join your forces, you conjugate those forces into a common goal, but it can be reversed, right? You can actually just let go of the rope and you become yourself again. You're not part of this kind of arrangement. So it's the conjugaison is something that remains to be open and not blended, like you said with chocolate milk and milk. But I think that's those differences in language that can be confusing.
I'm going to answer YouTube chat for a moment because it's a really good conversation. I think it's worth having as a moment. Paul asked, but wait, why is capital the comprehensive expression? Like, people being people would encompass capital. The important thing is not, are people blah, 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 what are people doing? But instead, there's this weird thing that everything that exists, and there are things that are heterogeneous at a basic level, which means different in terms of register, category, whatever you want to say, it doesn't matter. But everything can be given a value via capital. Everything. And if it can't, it will very quickly. It doesn't take a lot of time. That thing that's happening shifts how things become equated. In old days, go way back in time when people would have little tribes, prehistorical sort of anarcho commune, whatever you want to call it. The way that they would exist, they didn't have like trade like that. Oh, this feels like it's equal to that, so I'm going to go ahead and do this. Or here's $5. Instead, there was a lot of very particular rules about who could trade when and why and where and with what and who with what. Go read an extraordinary amount of structural anthropology. I recommend Godelier personally. Grial is also wonderful, but Godelier is fantastic to sort of break down how this sort of operated. The way that trade worked is not the same fundamentally as it does now at any level. At some point, king comes along and he finds a new land with people in it. And he goes, oh yeah, you belong to me now. And you got to pay taxes. And also you can keep your stupid little rules, but also you blah, 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 have to set up things. So the king, Britain did this a lot. Just say Britain or Europe. White people did this a fuck ton. It was great. Persians did it too. Lots of people did it, but Britain's the easy one. They go in and go, hey, we're now going to start extracting your resources. You work for us now. You get to do a bunch of stuff. They take the codes that were there before, those codes of who could trade when, who could marry who was related to, all of that. These things moved back into the king's setup where he would go, oh, here are my rules. And you could keep some of your cute little, weird anachronistic things, but he doesn't give a fuck. King doesn't care, but you're still producing and you're still doing stuff. Well, that is a bit different. Who determines what you do? Well, the king does, or you get your fucking hands cut off or killed. That's it. That's the end. So you're going to do what he says through unbridled, brutal political terror, frankly. But what is determined, well, this area is more valuable than this or that. That's kind of amongst the kings. Kings kind of determine that. Oh, I want a bunch of spice. I want a bunch of gold. I want that. It's the pressures of the king. Again, not the person, the position, the sovereign. That thing, he determines. Well, I would ask you, what determines that this Gatorade bottle is worth $2.95? Bottle of blue sugar water with some salt in it. Well, it's a lot of stuff because it's actually not just a bottle. It's oil. There's a lot of oil in this. It's particular kinds of oil, particular manufacturing, and also labor. Lots of labor in every part of this, and also forming and also experimentation and engineering and automation. Blah, 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 blah. Regulation. There's a billion things that go into it that determine that Gatorade bottle is going to be worth $2.95. But all of those things don't work as they did. How we determine value, instead, is in the direct relations at every step of the supply chain. And it's not just supply chain, but also the direct relations that everyone has at every point in their entire lives. You trade money, you pay for rent, you buy this, you buy that. The costs here, the costs there, companies, everyone. Every little minor transaction determines the value of capital at any given point. In aggregate, we have these big rules about how it works. Oh, capital's worth this much. The dollar's worth this much. Oh, we can trade for this. So here's how it operates. But everything's about those one-to-one direct instant relations constantly. But not just you. It goes deeper than that. It's actually desire. The impulses themselves are actually ultimately conditioned and changed by this because they become invested in value. Now, what is value? Well, there's a lot of questions there. And there's a lot of ways to talk about it. But for D&G, the investments in capital, the investments in value that are happening at every one of those tiny little levels that end up producing you at large to be confused in a YouTube stream and listen to me, who's a dumb fuck. All of these things going about, all of them are because capital and the value system that it has doesn't overcode. Instead, it allows the breakdown of all those codes and instead axiomatizes, where we have fuzzy rules about kind of how things need to be sorted. There's, a great one that we're starting to see fall apart that I'm fascinated by watching is Donald Trump as a pedophile, and people defending him are now like, actually, it's kind of cool. It's okay. It's okay that he did this. Why is that a big deal? That's the axiomatization of desire, like par excellence. It's hard to even talk about something that might be 2-3 years ago, these people were screaming about releasing all the Epstein files. Now they're terrified of it, or saying that actually everything's fine and it's not a big deal that he did these things. That this change is not because, oh, they're irrational or anything. No. That desire and value determines these things. And as these things stack, we start to understand them narratively via images of images, which we'll get into in a second. Right now, we're not talking about images of images. We're talking about very specifically the decoding and deterritorialization, and the way that this conjugation of elements, the decoded, deterritorialized flux, they don't remain separate. That's not how they work. They are the vibrations of waves. They're not in different places. We don't take that wave, that wave, that wave, or that vibe. They all come together, but it's particular operations that allow this. It's a conjugation of waves that end up becoming an interference pattern that's almost unknowable, that we can't trace back, because it's a fucking interference pattern of a fuck ton of these waves. And mathematically, these things are ultimately, when we talk about conjugation in this way, and I prefer it the mathematical term, which is actually in the 92's definitions here, the setup is about things that are related elements within a structure. It's predetermined. It's set up that they are going to work this way. When we talk about linguistic conjugation, English does it with everything. French, Romantic languages, huge amounts of this. Asiatic languages, an incredible amount of conjugation, where we have a verb, but it's the total verb, like run. I am running. Are you going to run? I ran. Conjugating these things with what we're talking about as we go. The conjugation creates, through its structure, an already existed related elemental structure as it goes. This is linguistic conjugation at a basic thing. There's systematic variations within the impulses that are doing this. This ultimately is creating this sort of really weird differential relation between all these heterogeneous fluxes that are flying on all of this. This is calculus from earlier. They were talking about dx, dy in capitalism. But the big thing to remember is that the relations, this differential relation, doesn't presuppose or even give a fuck about the qualities of terms. It doesn't give a shit. The qualities actually emerge from the relation itself. To say again, qualities don't go in, qualities come out the other side. And so we have a completely different way that the social order works. In coded societies, inscription marks bodies and the world directly. You plow the field and you scar it. You build into it. You walk on paths and destroy plant life. You get tattoos. You get scarification. You have injuries, whatever it is. You are written into directly. It's set up. But in capitalism, the axiomatic system precedes your body. Subjects are produced by the system. Bodies aren't inscribed on that produce actions. No. Completely different setup as a thing. You are constituted as a worker, as a consumer, as a bourgeois, as a capitalist by your position in these differential relations at any point. It is not by bodily marking in any capacity. And so as such, we have a completely different way of thinking about these things. We have regulation and application, which is the parenthetical that they end with here. All of these things are parentheticals. That's why they summarize them. But that's the specific mechanism. Axiomatic don't control directly, but it operates through the regulation, the adjustment of relation between flux, and the application of the abstract axiomatic to concrete situations. That was a lot of rambling.
I have a question. The axiomatic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Capitalism, which is kind of the body without organ, right? Is kind of what do the axiomatician?
Nope.
Yeah.
So nope.
Okay.
Okay. Try again. Say that sentence one more time. I'll break it down for you.
I was about to say.
The capital is what kind of producing like the axiomatic, right? It kind of, how can I say
seems
hypercode?
So let me say it's
Yeah.
if I say it seems to that it's the quasi cause, I'd probably say that more readily. Capital is the socius. It is the full body, not the body without organs. It's a full body. It's people in America, and you probably have heard this in news media. They talk about capitalists as job creators because to them, they put money in a factory and that creates jobs. This fully misunderstands the nature of capital in every single way and everything. It fucking is stupid. But people still say it, and they say it at large, and they say it all the fucking time. And a lot of people kind of just buy it because it kind of feels about right. Because when that factory wasn't there, someone came in and built it, and now there's a factory where I can get work. Thanks, Steve. That's the idea. It feels like these come from there, and it feels like the axiomatics come from capital. Oh, capital is determining these things, but it's not really that either. The whole social order is these really weird little one-to-one or specific, interactions of these waves, the dx dy, that produce a qualitative flux. They produce the qualitative. The quantitative produces that in all of these tiny little micrological setups, and at large, it seems like, and that's why, again, the full body without organs, they use this sort of term of this, I don't want to say illusory, but this layered thing that's completely different setup, where it's like, just as the BWO, you seem like you exist, and you seem like the BWO makes you who you are. It doesn't. That's not how it works. Desire's making everything. Desire is everything. But the process of desire obfuscates itself and plays around in a really complex way. You were trying to talk, Raj. One sec. Raj was trying to talk.
Oh, no. It's my mic is picking up too much stuff.
It's almost sometimes when I pre-read like Anti-Oedipus, sometimes I get lost when he mentioned the full body, right? Like the full body and the body without organ. Like sometimes it lost me, like these kind of distinction, right? Sometimes I got lost. So yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the things that helped when I started reading the French version of this is, and again, this may just be how I read English, but the corpus is actually the phrase they're using because it's not really body. We don't often in English use like the body of evidence, which is the term they mean with the corpus of evidence. We tend to use body to mean body. And so when we talk about this, it's kind of easier if you're going to say the corp plane, the full body, the corpus, which is the body of things, right? Versus clothed full body, which is tougher as well. The corpus, it to me, this sort of helped. When you go through the setup and they say the quote, I was looking for the quote, the socius is not a projection of the body without organs. Rather, the body without organs is the limit of the socius. It's tangent of deterritorialization, the ultimate residue of a deterritorialized socius. The socius, earth, body of the despot, capital money, are clothed full bodies, just as the body without organs is a naked full body. But the latter exists at the limit, at the end, not at the origin. So when they're talking about the setup of these things, and again, remember, all of this is at once. So there is no, there's the BWO and then step 2, step 3, step 4, and down the road it's not really that thing. Instead, it's the process of the impulse going poof out and in, and then sort of the pulsing of things, the desire of life. The phrasing that they probably would use is that the BWO is a tangent of deterritorialization. It is a thing that the socius approaches but never quite touches. The socius haunts the BWO the way that communism is a specter haunting Europe, right? But they're distinct. They're not the same thing. That's not really how they're set up as a thing. So the setup between them, and again, there's a reason that a lot of this takes a few times to sort of get through. But yeah, it's like someone in YouTube saying it's like body, as we say, for the body of a text, or the body, the work of art, the body of work that someone has. Like this is what they mean by body, because it's so for me it was easier to start thinking differently about that. But yeah, it's the socius and social formations, as they exist, they move from the organized bodies, which pre-exist them a bit. Like the socius is the organized bodies, the organized people. But social formations and how they work sort of move from that to the BWO through the deterritorialization of things. It doesn't work the other way. So schizophrenia becomes capitalism's product. It's not the foundation of capitalism. Schizophrenia is produced. It is the limit point, the break. Yeah. Is that reasonable? Noah, Raj, anyone? Ish. Doesn't have to be perfect, just ish.
I want to understand the relation between the schizophrenic and the limit, right? Like, repeated multiple times in the book, right? The schizophrenic going to the limit of the body without organs, right?
Right now we're talking through the differential relations of things and how that produces the qualitative elements. Now, capital utilizes, like, this is necessary for capital as a larger social system. But if someone's not relating things, what then? I mean, that would be the limit of capitalism, because as soon as things aren't related, they are not, there's no qualitative element that's generated there. And so as the schizophrenics are produced by capitalism, they show us the edge, because the schiz breaks down all large-scale meaning, narrative structures, connectivity, anything, to the point where everything can be connected to everything else. Because everything is connected, and because of their value. The schiz gives us a chance to go nail polish iPhone. I can't do this. I'm not good at this. I'm not this thing. But the breakdown of meaning, that's terrible, I'm sorry. But the breakdown of meaning, the breakdown of that connective thing produces no value, but it's also the edge. There's nothing beyond not connecting. There's nothing beyond not connecting. It is the edge of capitalism.
It's kind of a nonsense, but sense at the same time, as in, like, it's kind of like that. The schizophrenic is basically not caring about making sense. Making sense is, especially good sense, is a normative, hierarchized process of this to that. Like this, I'm aiming towards that, and everything is aiming, and it's all this normative thing. The edge of the process is total disconnection from everything. And again, they're not talking about the schizophrenic with the weird, like manic pixie girl shit. We're talking about severe automatism, autism, catatonia, where they're not connecting to anything socially at all. When you're not connecting to anything socially at all, it's the full breakdown. But there's no more differential relations happening there. It's all singularities. That's the end. That's the edge. So they represent, and they are, the sort of place where capitalism no longer functions. It's the edge of capitalism. But they're also not connecting to anyone, so it kind of doesn't do anything. It's not like it. Again, the edge of capitalism doesn't mean good. It's not. That's not what they're doing. This is sorry. Every time I talk about this, it's in the back of my head is like all the plastic pills viewers that exist. All of them. The CEOs are so schizo. VC people are so schizo. But
let's continue. Because why not?
But just before, just a thought, something that, maybe was introduced before, but it's also, schizophrenia is also used as an alternative to neuroticism, the way it's used in psychoanalysis as well, to mark a difference of structure between, feudal, family-centered, or community-centered system versus like the family within the capitalist arrangement. So they say, it's not about neuroticism anymore. It's about schizophrenia and how it schizophrenize people. So that's a shift also that's happening, because Deleuze and Guattari are always trying to do like this kind of universal history. So within that universal history, there's like the development, like developmental stages, and schizophrenia, it would be specific to capitalism.
To explain a little bit, I think, of what Roger's saying, because it is actually really an important point. Traditional psychoanalytic thought, and I would say I would argue a lot of sort of the mental space when it comes to how people talk about it, even in cog science shit these days. The paradigm is privileging the neurotic. The neurotic as a thing is like as an entity tends towards narcissism, tends towards a very personal, I should say, anxiety-filled existence that is grounded specifically in trying to fit in socially. So, like the narcissism that they're driving towards, they want us to be neurotic, narcissistic citizens, more or less. D&G are like, no, actually, the schizo, not revolutionary, but that schizophrenia is the universe of productive, reproductive desiring machines. So for them, privileging the schizo, the process of it, not the clinical entity, as they distinguish it, specifically centers the process sort of theory that they've got, the arrangement of the subject, how they come about as the thing to be heading towards, and that is being privileged as center. Is that fair, Raj? Just as a tiny version?
Yeah. But also, just to put my point clearly, when you use neuroticism, it's a reaction or a symptom of a system prevalent into the 19th century. Schizophrenia, as capitalism advances, is a symptom of another form of system. So when they use the clinical definition, because sometimes they use it, it's to mark this difference that we've entered like a new phase into the development. So, I know that, what's his name? Levi Bryant, one of the OO guys, when he was working on Deleuze, he said at one point that, he had an hypothesis that we live in this age of schizophrenia now, which is different than the age of neuroticism when it comes down to like mental symptoms.
So with that, the next sentence, which is insane, it's technically, all this page is technically like 3 sentences. So I'm just trying to get through it. But this is like the next little bit here, is specifically about how we find ourselves with particular relations in that differential. Remember, we were just talking about the differential. This is the thing. This is the third major clause they're kind of going through here. A surplus value determined as a surplus value of flux. God damn, this could be so much. A surplus value determined by a surplus value of flux whose extortion is not brought about by a simple arithmetical difference between two quantities that are homogeneous and belong to the same code, but precisely by differential relations between heterogeneous magnitudes that are not raised to the same power. A flux of capital and a flux of labor as human surplus value in the industrial essence of capitalism. Flux of financing, flux of payment or incomes in the monetary inscription of capitalism. A market flux and a flux of innovation as machinic surplus value in the operation of capitalism. Surplus value as the first aspect of its eminence. There's so much here. It's so fucking much here. This is them marrying Marx's definition of surplus value in with everything they've talked about at this point, because Marx talked about surplus value as the difference between value of labor power and the value created by labor itself, right? But for them, they're like, actually, capitalism works even more deeply and more multiplicitous than that, you might say, because it's not that surplus value comes from that divide. It's instead emergent from the differential relations between decoded flux. It's not merely arithmetical subtraction. That's that opening thing they say here. Whose extortion is not brought about by a simple arithmetical difference between two quantities that are homogeneous and belong to the same code. It's very important that that you get this. This isn't, oh, I made X number of dollars for my boss, but I only get this much. That's how much surplus was created. It's basic core Marx stuff. Great. They're like, no, it's actually not that. Those things are what you're talking about is, or trying to talk about, what Marx is trying to talk about is like this homogeneous quantity between things, that labor, the pay you get as a labor is the same as what a boss gets. But that's not really a thing. These aren't homogeneous quantities. That's not how these things work. Instead of subtracting one from the other, it's about the differential relations between heterogeneous magnitudes not raised to the same power, which means that the underlying flux is qualitatively different. Capital and labor are not the same fucking thing. There's nothing about them that is qualitatively the same. Doesn't work. They also are not raised to the same power. They work in different orders. dx and dy in calculus, which they've used quite a bit. These are infinitesimals that work at different orders. That's dx and dy. Derivative of x, derivative of y, graph it out, that kind of thing. So what this means is that the surplus value that is created is emergent from the relation between the flux at different powers. It is not purely subtractive of homogeneous elements. Okay, so they give 3 examples. They talk about the way that capital and labor work, the flux of capital, the flux of labor. It's a classic Marxist sort of setup here, but they've said, no, a little bit different here. This is human surplus value in industrial essence. So this is variable capital in relation to constant capital, right? But it's human surplus value. Again, separating things out that are qualitatively different. There's the flux of financing and the flux of monies for payment or revenue, incomes, okay? This huge flux is, again, think of the power, the size, the scale, massive for financing, capital as power. It operates fundamentally at a different order than whatever paycheck you get. Unless you're, I mean, no matter who you are, actually. Like, no one's getting $1 billion a paycheck. That's not how that works. But Elon Musk is in charge of billions of dollars of payments and all of that. This is not the setup. They work at different orders. Fundamentally different. Fundamentally different. Remember, this is Bernard Schmidt in chapter 3 we went over. Money has 2 aspects. It's capital and then it's consumptive. What you spending $10 on a meal, happy day, is not the same thing as Elon Musk buying Twitter with everything that went with that. It's not how it works. And then the third they talk about is the flux of the market and the flux of innovation. Machinic surplus value on one side in the operation of capitalism, right? So how capital extracts value from technical innovation, from R&D, from scientists and artists, like we were just talking about. These are things you don't measure in labor time. There's It just fundamentally doesn't work that way. An artist's work is not how many hours he spent on it, or the labor he put into it, or the time he spent studying. That's not how that works. And the same is true of someone who has a spark of genius and invents something versus someone who spent hundreds of years in a lab. The value of that isn't determined by labor time. These are fundamentally incommensurate, qualitatively different things every step of this way. So as they're breaking down this sort of weird threefold differential structure that they're saying here, this is how capitalism fills the field of immanence through surplus value extraction of these heterogeneous elements. Heterogeneous elements. And again, it's emergent, just to say sort of as a thing. It's such a different way of sort of talking about this, but it's kind of super, super important. The differential relations between the decoded flux, from this emerges the surplus value. It doesn't go into it and we just subtract one from the other. Can't. They're qualitatively different. God.
There's one thing I've been wondering about.
Please.
This description of the axiomatic, the way they use it, from a certain perspective, it sounds very similar to how economists like Hayek and Friedman would talk about the pricing mechanism and the spontaneous organizing powers of markets, and how it transfers information in a way that other economic systems just can't do, and that's what makes capitalism so great. Obviously a very surface level reading, but it seems to me they're looking at kind of the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, they're not in a different place. I think they probably wouldn't say it's the good part, best part, or whatever, but it does function this way. It's very difficult to argue, I think, fundamentally, that capital is in some way able to find the most efficient way to do things to detrimental, horrifying ends. But that there is a really weird efficiency driver that's constantly happening. But to them, it's not just purely in capital. Capital is where capital's the function of it, but it doesn't actually emanate from that. It's from the way that desire and the axiomatics play in. We seem to think, oh, well, capital's determining where these things go, but it's like, no, it's the differential relation happening at every single level between all of the different elements and like the entire mass of things. And this is kind of what they're driving at here in this last little bit, as they're sort of talking through, or this entire paragraph really, as they're talking through how capital functions in each of these different ways. Because again, I think it is in line with a lot of the more hardcore economists, but they're not personifying capital. They're not saying, oh, this is what capital does. They're saying this is the function of desire within a system that is ultimately about this sort of combinatory relational difference between all of these elements brought down. This is how things emerge from that, from the multitude of smaller interactions. But they don't think, they definitely wouldn't say capitalism is like all bad. Like it's like pure evil or something. That's not what they do. They would probably make a joke along the lines of it's the best system except for all the others, or it's the best we've had so far. The way capitalism freed desire is incredible. And the way that it breaks down the sort of predetermined, codified, harsh brutality of previous despotism. But it is, as they say, also more repressive and brutal than anything else. Like they're not ashamed to say sort of all of that together. So yeah, they're not wildly far from that, I don't think. How you phrase that. I don't think they're saying something drastically different. The end point obviously is a little bit different, but they're touching into that stuff. Let's do the next one. A ruling class, let me see if I can mark it for you, because this is starting to get, I'm not even sure where I'm at in the page. This is so awful. A ruling class, we're right here. Does that come through cleanly? Seems to. A ruling class. This is the fourth clause. The ruling class that is all the more ruthless, as it does not place the machine in its service, but is the servant of the capitalist machine. In this sense, a single class, content for its part with drawing incomes that, however enormous, differ only arithmetically from the worker's wages incomes, whereas the class functions on a more profound level as creator, regulator, guardian of the great non-appropriated, non-possessed flux, incommensurable with wages and profit, which marks at every step along the way the interior limit of capitalism. Their perpetual displacement, their reproduction on an always larger scale, the movement of interior limits as the second aspect of the capitalist field of immanence, defined by the circular relationship, great flux of financing, reflux of incomes, and wages, afflux of raw profit. I'm going to take a nap. I'll take a nap. People like to talk about Trump and Musk and all these rich fucks as being in charge. That their choices, they determine things. It's very Jewish question. It's very Three Jews in a Cave, very conspiracy theory, very childish, to be frank. The ruling class, there's no reason to think that they are any different than any other person. In fact, that as D&G outlined here, this is actually a really paradoxical setup for them. They don't use capital as a tool. That's not really how it works. I'll explain it, but let's just go through like the light version of it. You use a hammer to drive a nail. A capitalist will talk about deploying capital as a tool, but that's not really what they're doing. Capital has a bit of its own thing going on. They serve capital. Like Marx even talks about this. Like Marx says this, that the capital is this automatic subject that commands capitalists. Like capitalists are bastards, but they're someone who has an extraordinary amount of capital can manipulate markets, but they can't manipulate markets outside of what the market is capable of. They don't like choose it to happen. That's not really how it works. They are cuckolds of capital. Yes, Estelle, they're cuckolds of capital. It's a very different beast. It says they're all the more ruthless, and it's such a specific phrasing. And it's all the more ruthless, d'autant plus impitiable, which is not really the phrasing of that. Does impitiable have a impitoyable? Impitoyable. Come on, Raj. Estelle. They're pitiless?
Impitoyable.
Pitiless. Yeah, merciless, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They don't offer pity.
Ruthless is such an interesting phrasing there. I don't like that. Yeah, I'm going to say it's that they all do not give pity. They do not afford mercy for others because they're not acting from a personal will. They are functionaries of the logic of capital. They aren't ruthless because they're ruthless. They're functionaries of the logic of capital. And when we consider this, there really is only one class. In this sense, a single class, content for its part, withdrawing incomes. This is a... you want, like, really fucking spicy takes, there is only one class within capital. There's only one class, that of the bourgeois. The proletariat exists as a reaction to this class, dependent on what that class does. They do not exist outside of it. They are for this reason, it's one of the big reasons that they talk about subject groups and subjugated groups, but workers are not constituted as a class by the axiomatic. They only become class through counter investment in the system. Yeah. So when you talk about the incomes of one versus the other, right? The incomes, when we talk about them, it's homogeneous quantities that are measured in monetary units of dollars, right? But there is a difference in amounts, but it's more quantitative. It's more zeros. It's more zeros. Someone who has $40 billion, right? However, there's this homogeneity obscures the actual functional difference, because the bourgeois does not own things. The bourgeois doesn't really consume surplus. They manage the surplus. They manage the flux of finance that operates at different orders than income flux. The non-appropriated, things that can't be owned like property. The non-possessed, wealth that can't just be hoarded. The incommensurable, things that are not commensurable with general wage profits or cash. So there's actually an exceptionally creative flux of credit, debt, and investment capital that is, Bernard Schmidt calls it the instantaneous creative flow. And banks create this. The process creates this and builds this. And this is what they're playing with. This is what the bourgeois manage. This is what the bourgeois control. It's a completely different beast. It's a completely different beast to sort of discuss. Is everyone following so far?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Because it's important. It's important as we go. So back to Marcellus's thing earlier about the interior exterior limits of things, right? So capitalism doesn't really have an exterior limit. Well, let me get through this. There's a lot, but it has instead interior limits. Everything can be axiomatized, right? Everything can be built into one of these sort of odd little rules and systems and things. But there are interior limits, places where accumulation of flux, of energy, of impulses, of desire, hits barriers. Things like population, high or low, right? The natural tendency of profit to fall, the realization of profit at various places to come about. But those limits are not fixed. Those limits shift and change and sort of are constantly moving, because capitalism doesn't eliminate limits. That's not what capitalism does. It displaces limits outward, mostly into new markets, new opportunities, new territories, and reproduces them on a much, much larger scale overall into larger crises, extensive exploitation in various areas. This is the second aspect of immanence. It's incredibly important to sort of get this. I mean, AI as a thing is a case study of this. Every single major economic crisis we've ever had, globally in any capacity, is this. This is the interior limits that it's constantly finding. Instead of destroying them and eliminating them, because it doesn't do that, it moves them outwards. It moves them into places where suddenly there's new markets, new opportunities, new things, reproducing them at larger and larger scales until ultimately crises. But again, this doesn't hurt capitalism. It hurts It hurts a lot of people, but capitalism keeps chugging along. So you end up in a place where, and let's take 2008 is like a fun one, right? So you have the creation of credit for people to buy homes, right? But that's not really how it happens. You have the creation of credit, which is the flux of financing. This is the circular relationship that they have here, right? That they're about to, that is in the parenthetical. Movement of interior limits is the second aspect, capital field of eminence, defined by this circular relationship. We have the flux of financing, which is the creation of credit as a thing socially, like overall. Then we have a reflux of incomes in wages, salaries. This is where the monies, this initial credit makes its way to workers as wages. And then the afflux of raw profit, which is the return flux as profit when wages become spent or consumed in society. This circulation is the interior limit because surplus value itself has to be realized through this exchange. So potential crises of overproduction or underconsumption and other things, they get realized as well, just in different ways. But this is why those things are crises, because it always has to be realized in exchange. You can't, crypto, there's a billion meme coins. They always have to come back to what someone will pay for them. They always have to. They don't just get to have their own weird value that people just have forever. They eventually have to. Someone has to pay for them. They have to come back to exchange. So the potential crisis is always there. Overproduction, underconsumption, all the shit we've talked about, falling rates of profit, realization problems, all those things are constantly there because without that exchange, there's no system because you don't have those profits when the wages are spent, which create credit in return, which distributes to workers. This circulation constantly. And so with this, well, one sec, we'll stop there. I'll take a second. Amethyst Poet says, doesn't the existence of class create another class of those who do not exist in that class? No. Why would it? That presumes that they exist, that the negative, the not being in the class, is specifically all that's needed. But that's not all that's needed. There's more than that requires someone to be in a class. I mean, that's why people, and especially people on the left, have had to invent a billion terms for proletariats in various ways in order to encompass everyone who's not sort of a bourgeoisie, but also the bourgeoisie, and also this and that, and blah, blah, blah. And no. As the system functions and it builds and makes a class, that class, the bourgeois, that are working with the flux of capital and are managing the flux of capital. And then as a counter investment, as a counter to that, the proletariat class is developed as a counter, but they don't just naturally exist. No.
I have a question.
Yes.
The statement in parentheses there.
Yes.
The movement of interior limit. In the original French, it says jeu de limite intérieure. I just want to make sure I get this because I didn't understand how jeu translated to movement at first, but do they mean move as in a game where you make a move?
Okay, I can answer this if you... Can I?
Please.
Okay, so when you can say, in English, you can say something has play. There's play in this bolt. You can move it around even though it's screwed into something. It can... That's how they mean. I think they mean it.
They mean play. It's exactly that. It's La Poujade also translates it and plays with movement as well. But it is that type of move. It's not just moving. It's the play that something has. And it's not a play like in a game where I make a play. It's close. Like language is fucking insane as a thing. But if I hammer in and I'm building out a house and I'm got a bunch of frames and I grab one of the 2x4s and I go, this has some play to it. and I move it back and forth, that thing that I'm doing, that's movement, but it's the play of it. So when we talk about the movement of the interior limits, they're not talking about like it's attached to rockets and they're like scooting from this place to that place or whatever, but instead there's play in them. It bends, it moves slightly. Like there's play, there's enough play that it can bend enough to account for things and play back and forth.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Reed says, so the play of interior limits makes sense. Capitalism's big claim to fame is presented as its ability to be dynamic and responsive. Yes, the interior limits aren't hard and fast. Basically, they don't want you to think that like it's an immovable post. Their interior limits never change. But it's also not that they're scooting all over the place and like zip-zapping. It's that there's play to them. There's hey, 2008 financial crisis. The entire idea of, hey, the government shouldn't regulate banks, and also shouldn't bail people out. But also, kind of guys, come on. Like, that's kind of what they mean, like that moment, like, come on. You know, it's like, that rule is kind of, there's play in that rule. You know, there's a little bit of room. Because, it's like kind of like that kind of thing. Because the accumulation encountering barriers, those barriers, like let's say overpopulation hits, right? Overpopulation, it doesn't mean, well, actually it might. Let me get through this because it's horrifying when I start talking about this. I just realized where I'm going with it. Overpopulation is a pretty hard line. Like, what do you do in order to deal with that? What are the rules that are allowed when we have overpopulation and exchange can't be met? We just kill a bunch of people. Like I just kill a bunch of people. That's what you do. And because we didn't do that before, there's play in these limits. I'm not joking when I say this. There's play in these limits. This happens. This is how people come to these places. They hit these lines. They go, oh, well, I guess we've got to just deport all of the illegals because egg prices are going up. There's play in the rules. There's play in the interior limits.
That is so very interesting because I just now realized this translates directly to my native language as well. Like when you see a building being affected by wind, you say it plays in the wind. The spelar i vinden. I never thought about that before, but it falls into place.
And we don't think about it as that building is moving, but it is. And there's a building in San Francisco. I got to go up to like the top floor. They had to install this insane fucking like counterweight because the winds moved it. And the building had play in the wind. And you don't realize how much when you look at it, it doesn't even look like it's moving. But when you're in it, it's insane. It is, you feel like you might die. You feel like you could die. It's awful. But that thing, there's a weirdness in the way that that's static, yet also that has play. So it's movement. This is why, like, again, Lapoujade's translation of this, I think, works really nicely, where he's talking about these sort of aberrant movements of things. The way that things have play in them, the way that this works is very interesting. But again, that's within capital, the thing that's happening and how it's playing. And they conclude here, the movement, there's an odd bit that we've got in here. And that's the effusion of anti-production within production. We'll get through all of this, don't worry. But effusion of anti-production within production as the realization or absorption of surplus value in such a way that the military, bureaucratic, and police apparatus finds itself grounded in the economy itself, which directly produces libidinal investments for the repression of desire. And then the last parenthetical. Anti-production as the third aspect of capitalist eminence, expressing the twofold nature of capitalism, production for production's sake, but under the conditions of capital. All right. Effusion means outpouring, effusive, like is pushing out, is outpouring of anti-production. The goddamn it, anti-production is so complicated. Anti-production is an affirmatively created. It's not a negative. This isn't a blockage of negativity. It is an affirmative thing that is about maintenance. There's a lot of ways to talk about this, but this is spending towards maintenance, the consumption of excess to keep the system going, not to go do things. Anti-production is an apparatus that limits and channels and consumes production. Ways we do this in the modern world that are really, really clear is military spending. We put money in bombs that, sure, they kill people, but it's getting rid of that money. Like, how many billions of dollars went into Iraq? That's a surplus. What would we have done with that otherwise? We would have had to, change fundamentally the way that the entire system works. This way, we could just destroy capital. That's what they're doing. They're destroying capital. Bureaucratic overhead is I consider military spending part of that. But bureaucratic overhead, the maintenance of the system, just, hey, look, we've got janitors, we've got people here, we've got people who manage other people here, we've got someone who runs through and collate stuff, we need people to stamp and do all these forms. We've got to do all of these things. That's the setup, right? That's what we need. There's police security apparatuses, again, the maintenance of the same. This was what anti-production spending is done. This is a wasteful spending or planned obsolescence that keeps things the same, or luxury consumption. Again, maintenance of the same. Anti-production is a gold standard. Donald Trump is anti-production personified. You see that a lot at these extremely high levels. He wants golden toilets, golden everything, golden spray painted shit from Home Depot. He doesn't fucking care. All of that. None of this is anything but anti-production within production. What about investing? Investing is not anti-production. It's different. We'll get to it. Actually, I can get to it here in a little bit. Or how the military spends developing weapons that are obsolete by the time. I mean, the F-35 is one of my favorite trillion-dollar planes, and the story behind it and how it's not going to do anything. But the amount of money that gets spent on it, huge. And it's a little different because, again, the old systems had some semblance of anti-production. The Earth Socialists had temples or potlatch or ceremonies and things like this that were locuses of this excess, where you would, they would give offerings, they'd burn excess, the chief would give it to everyone, they would redistribute it, they'd have big celebrations, whatever it is that is able to handle excess. The king would have the palace. Versailles is basically anti-production. So are wars at large. So is Columbus going across the ocean. The amount of money spent on all of those things, it's all blown. Anti-production is blown. Basically cash. That's it. It has two functions. It converts surplus value into actual profit, which is really rare, but it happens, or absorption. Maybe adsorption would probably be a better word here, but that's the whole thing. It consumes surplus that cannot be reinvested profitably. So this stops overproduction as a thing, which would happen in old times, the whole thing, right? So they run through and they give a handful of these examples. Military, bureaucratic, police apparatus grounded in economy. Again, it's common for people on the left to talk about how, ACAB, sure, ACAB, great, but that the police or all these things are outside of. Here I go, anti-anything.
Ho ho. Suresh 0T super chatted $5. Thank you for keeping me awake driving through bumfuck Indiana. Brooks, you're gonna be blown away by the kitchen thing I just picked up.
Suresh has been going to great lengths to find incredibly expensive kitchen gadgets in remote areas of the country that are very, very cheap to be refixed. So thank you for the $5, Suresh. Always great. But these things, the military isn't a parasite. The bureaucracy is not a parasite. The police aren't external. They are founded in the economy itself. The economy produces its own repressive apparatus. It's all the same shit. Repression is not imposed from outside. We build it from within. That's always in everything. It's never outside. There's no outside. Stop saying that. Stop talking about that. But these things also directly produce the investments for the repression they are, right? Which is crazy. The economy isn't simply producing commodities. That's like junior version for them. For them, it's the very libidinal investments, the investments of the libido, the desires of the unconscious that invest in repression itself. So as we talked about before, workers desire wage labor, citizens, the police state, masses, fascism. The economy produces libidinal support for itself. And that's this last line that they have that really is like putting a fine hat on the whole thing, ultimately. This is the third aspect of immanence. Anti-production. That's it. After surplus value extraction and interior limits, anti-production as imminent to production.
Paul super chatted $5.79. Thanks for the explanation earlier. I would be drinking out of a tiny coffee pot if I could digest all that info too. Laughing face.
Laughing face. I like when it says those things. Thank you, Paul, for the 5 euros, which I'm sure will always be worth as much as everything. And we're not completely screwed as a world. So that's the setup we're talking about here. So there's this twofold nature of capitalism. And this is the last thing we're talking about. There's production for production's sake, right? Number must go up. But it's not just number go up. That's not really the setup. That's a production for production's sake. It's only the first, right? But it has to do it under the conditions of capital. So there's limitless expansion, but this limitlessness itself encounters limits, which means anti-production has to sort of acquire, absorb, handle the surplus. So capitalism's contradiction, as identified by Marx, right? It's always this, always must get bigger, always absolute deterritorialization, blah, blah, blah. But it's not just that. If it was just that, it would be able to die under its own contradiction. It has the salve for itself. It imposes limits through reterritorialization and handles it through anti-production. So that's the last bit here. It's kind of a big one. Deterritorialization, yeah, capitalism's heading there. But it also has created and imposed limits through reterritorialization. It's handling its own contradiction. Yeah.
He actually mentioned that in similar point in volume 3, when he said that capitalism create its own barriers, right, in the falling rate of profit, in the section, I think in the third part of the section in volume 3. Capitalism creates its own barriers, right? But it kind of like overstep these barriers by capital, by capital itself. So yeah.
Yeah. And this paragraph that we just did, which we've only got the tiniest bit of here, but this big ass fucking paragraph, this is the paragraph. This actually might be the paragraph. This is capitalism. They're defining capitalism, and they're bringing everything they've talked about so far into this. In capitalism, here's what makes it different. Okay? In capitalism, the full body becomes capital money itself as socius, replacing territorial codes and despotic overcodings with a great social axiomatic. This is a system of quantitative, abstract relations that can indefinitely expand by adding new axioms. This creates a molar gregarious aggregate whose mode of subjugation has no equal. This capitalist immanence has 3 aspects. The first is the surplus value as surplus value of flux. Capitalism does not extract surplus through a simple A minus B equals C. That's not the setup. It's differential relations between heterogeneous flux operating at different stanchions, powers, exponentially different layers, measures. There's a million different modes. Well, it fucking doesn't matter. There's just tons of different things that function. There's capital flux, finance flux, market flux. These things don't work the same. They aren't the same. That's it. Okay. The second part. Okay. There's the movement, the play of interior limits. The ruling class exists inside of capitalism not as owners, not as landlords. They are creators, regulators, and guardians of this non-appropriated, non-possessed flux of financing that is incommensurable with wages and profits. Things to remember. The last few years, humanity made enough food. Not for us to have a meager little bit. We're on page 372, Olivia. 372. This is not, okay. Oh, they've just got all the capital and they control stuff. No. The incommensurable reality of everything. The stuff that doesn't work with wages and profits, which there are things that this is the case of. The social order. Let's just talk about that. How do you buy a social order? You can't. These are non-possessed flux of financing, non-appropriated flux of financing. Capital functions here, but it functions specifically by giving play to interior limits. Capital has no exterior limit. There's no way to limit it. But interior limits, there are barriers to accumulation that happen. It perpetually displaces and reproduces these limits on ever larger scales. This is the circular movement of capital and how it works. The third thing they go through here, and it's kind of the big aspect, I think, that's worth, I mean, all of these are important. It's one I tend to personally focus on, is that anti-production is imminent to production. These do not get extricated. This is not something capital adds to the way that things work. You don't have labor and then later someone steals money from you and gives it to the police. That it fundamentally misunderstands how things work at a social level across everything. None of this. None of this. No. The military, the bureaucracy, and the police are not external. They are grounded in the economy itself, which directly produces surplus value and libidinal investments for its own repression. So production for production's sake exists, but under the conditions of capital. The conditions of capital are these elements they've just laid out. The field of eminence, the decoding deterritorialization on an unprecedented level, and then the axiomatic as it functions. So, capitalism has exceptional revolutionary power and exceptional reactionary capture. Yeah. Yeah, that's probably how I'd phrase it.
When you said capitalism has a reactionary capture, what do you mean about that? Reactionary capture?
Well, it decodes on the one side. It's absolutely deterritorializes and decodes. And then it's reactionary because it's a reaction. The capture of desire. It happens through axiomatization, through reterritorialization, and through anti-production. It's reactionary. Those things are a reaction to desire. That they're not there, waiting. Oh God, someday someone's going to invent the internet. I better hang out right here. Like it's all of these things are eternally emergent, and as they're emergent and they go sort of back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, they clearly produce something that, oh God, we don't have any codes around the internet or digital or what that means. We should create some. And that's how it works. We create the axiomatics to justify and build it into capital. So capital can absolutely break everything down, and it's incredibly revolutionary. Yet, what it deterritorializes with one hand, it must reterritorialize with the other, and it does. And it does so with anti-production, axiomatizations, and reterritorialization. Here I go, anti-Oedipus.
Suresh0T super chatted $5. I've sometimes thought of these people more like priests of capital rather than true owners.
not a bad, especially in the Nietzschean sense, not a bad way to talk about it. Because, again, let's say we have 1,000 capitalists. They need to be, even if they have some significant sway and power, and they do, most of them, none of them are going to end up homeless next year. But if their investments don't go the way that everything is kind of going, they'll lose money. They can't force a thing. In mass, they can make a thing sort of happen, but it's not that they're making a thing happen. AI and LLMs are a great example. I do not think it's possible to point at a single person who's like orchestrating the AI LLM thing and has from the beginning. I think people at large generally think this shit is fucking intelligent and generally think it'll work a certain way. And they generally don't understand how intelligence, labor, work, or anything actually comes about because people are fucking dumb. So what's happened is they've begun pouring more and more money into it, and they can't stop because this is, again, the nature of how capital functions. If they do, and if you didn't know, Peter Thiel and a few others have pulled a fuck ton of money out of NVIDIA and a few other AI things in the last 3 days. Buckle up. They're less doing that because they want to destroy things and more because this is how they understand what's needed or how it works. It's not really grift logic. It's capitalists can fail too, because the system's doing what it does. Now, they have more control, sure, but it's not control. They're not making the system. I mean, Marx would even say this is a horrifying way to think of it. They're not sitting there going, excellent, you know what the next thing is? Let's get back to extraction shooters. That was all the rage a few years ago. No, there's so many more factors that are going into this, and they're putting money where they think money can be made. And if money's made, then they go more there and more people go there until it doesn't work. And then they, figure out how to justify it and make it work. Oh, by grift logic, I mean saying and doing XYZ yields. Yes, correct. They're vibe coding just like everything else. They're vibing. Capitalists are themselves compelled by laws external to them. Yes, absolutely. You were going to say Steam Junkie.
Is there short-sightedness on all of these decisions they make by design, or just like something they can't get around even if they wanted to?
If you're referring to something like they're putting a bunch of money into things that are slowly pushing us towards climate disaster, like that kind of thing?
Yeah. Just the way they invest in general.
Well, so this is where, if they didn't invest as they were doing, would they make money? Like this is... if Jeff Bezos tomorrow were to go, hey, I'm going to just offer up Amazon as a nonprofit, and we're going to make the whole thing a worker-owned commune, he wouldn't really be allowed to do that. And then at the same time, someone else would just come in and replace Amazon as a for-profit thing. They're just outside of being able to control. If all of them got together and said, hey, let's do everything we can to stop climate change and do that, at what point is there one guy who's a dick who doesn't and therefore makes an extra, $2 billion? This is the challenge of capital. This is how they're set up. They'll lose everything unless they're in the mix, unless they're doing it. And it's doing what it does. It is a destructive, brutalizing, uncaring long-term thing, very focused on what's happening now. Because it's based in the differential and the variability of such a thing that way. It's brutal.
Okay.
I wish I had a better answer. It's sad. It's not happy. But like, what would make a capitalist change their mind? But it's not just that. It's let's say we destroyed society tomorrow. I like to ask, we give everyone their socialist revolution. How many diabetics are you okay with dying in the next week? Because the entire global supply chain that creates and produces diabetes medication at a level that is able to be, for as many people as it is, it's kind of amazing that we have that many people, that would just go away. Because the reason every step of that process works is because those people are being paid so they can pay their rent and their money, or every step. Think of all the different lines, everything. So if suddenly tomorrow everyone had money and no one needed to work anymore, what would be the reason they'd go to work and finish, the synthesis of the diabetes medication, or the guy running the forklift that moves it from one place to another, or the 20 other forklift guys who have to move it from one place to another? What makes those things happen in the order they need to happen in order for my buddy who's diabetic to get his medication so he's not dead? That chain of events is kind of exceptionally complicated and horrifying, but also I don't know of another way. So if the capitalists came along and they said, let's just undo everything and stop doing anything that has to do with negative climate change, what would that look like? Because they fundamentally need to do something that controls the flux that are happening. That what would happen to society? What would happen to anything? Would we end up in a place, I tend to argue this, if this happened and the economy collapsed and I would be burning leaves outside to find heat for my family. Would it accelerate climate? Like, where is the thing happening and how do we change it at a structural level? Isn't just, we need to stop for climate change. It's like, well, why and what changes around that and what are the incentives that make these things happen? It's a nightmare. That's why it's a big fucking... the example of the diabetes medication is the one I use, and it can be applied to stopping oil production. Okay, but then all of the stuff that oil production is a part of, which is fucking horrifying when you actually get into it. I used to joke that action figures are the most brilliant way per unit to sell oil that anyone ever came up with. It is. It's way better than gasoline. That shit's like expensive. That shit's cheap in comparison. But like, how would you do these things? How would you set that up? And how would you then have a society? Because we live in a society, but how do the people around you find meaning, get their food, get the things around them, get their medication? And if the answer is, I'm okay with a whole bunch of diabetics dying, it's like, oh, okay, cool. We can have that conversation. Like, we could do that. It just is a harder conversation, I think. And it leans towards the eco-fascism pretty fast, too. Could anti-production be seen as how the job of mergers and acquisitions is to combine companies without any thought as to whether the merger makes sense because you get paid for the merger whether it succeeds or fails? I'd probably lean towards mergers and acquisitions less being anti-production and more being just capitalist capture. Anti-production is about the expenditure of excess. And so there's some level where that might be the case. Microsoft buys Bethesda or Activision because they have so much fucking extra money. They're spending it in these places. But and then ultimately a lot of it is lost, labor is destroyed, and all of those things. So I'm not necessarily going to disagree with that. We tend to be talking about it specifically as elements in the order of production, and anti-production being that which displaces the excess. So regulations, for example, on these companies, or taxes, or the military, art programs, for example, nonprofits that are real nonprofits, not just where they put money into their own company and then lie in order to make themselves richer. It's tougher. Anti-production is the function of the destruction of capital. It comes from, in the tradition, as they talked about in chapter 3, let's say we had a big old commune, at some point, we all need to be producing. You don't want to produce less than everyone needs. So everyone's producing at the top level. You're all doing that. The way it works sort of naturally is you end up with more. You end up with a lot more. In fact, you end up with a lot more than people need over time, as every day you make, you go out, you kill a deer, you come back and there's 2 extra, burgers that you can make. But you do that enough and you end up with a bunch of extra burgers. Then you end up with a bunch and a bunch. And at some point, you have too much shit and you need to get rid of it. So there's lots of ways they go through Guattari. This is A Cursed Share if you ever want to read, I think, probably one of the better books on it. In order to stop people from accumulating this and, I have a bunch of burgers. Now my job is just to hold on to the burgers or the corn or this, and I sell it to people. Ha 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 ha. I control this thing, which would centralize power. What they used to do is they used to do potlatch or a big orgy of food, or they would burn it for the gods or whatever as an offering. What this does is it literally destroys excess. So that way there isn't an accumulation of excess at this level. Does that make sense, Brad? I'll assume yes. Do you got something, Steam Junkie? Because that's 3 hours of AO. I'm pretty much at this point. Poof. So anti-production.
I just bumped my push to talk.
Oh, you're good. So anti-production is excess spending to ensure your populace does not revolt. No. No, because that assumes that's the sort of, there's no goal that way. Excess concentrates power. So let's, again, think of everyone here who's in this chat. We all work together. Some of us are gardeners. Some of us are like janitors. Doesn't matter. I'm chief because that's the way it fucking works. And we go through and every day we're doing what we can, and we actually produce enough food for all of us to eat. But we don't stop there. No one just goes, okay, cool, stop. We've got enough. That's not how it works. Instead, people go out, they grow, they build, they do things, they hunt, they come back with anything they can catch. You do everything. You end up with excess. It's the way it works. You end up with excess. But that excess, if I, the chief, were to, I'm just going to hold on to all this excess and, I really like Roger, so I'm going to give Roger a little bit of extra. And Bread, I don't care for you. And I'm going to give some more to Estelle. I then have power concentrated. And primitive societies, and this is something that is really kind of universal. It's amazing. Clastres wrote Society Against the State. What they really wanted to do is they spent a lot of time like preventing any single place of power. Power was something that everyone felt in these primitive communities very much constantly. Steve would have a little bit too much power because his wife produced, too many kids. And so he's got a little bit, or this guy that, or this or that. And so they constantly would be kind of always pushing against the accumulation of power. Well, accumulation is accumulation of power. So by literally destroying the excess, setting fire to it, or having a huge orgy where everyone eats, or throwing it off of a fucking cliff or into the ocean, doesn't fucking matter. Destroying the accumulation, they would have a sort of a jouissance, an explosion of this excess, and then they would return to having no excess. And this would consistently happen. This is anti-production's function. As a society, if, for example, and we're getting there, because again, we're in a weird place where I found a clip of it was so weird to read. It was Donald Trump's labor secretary talking about the price of eggs and meat and how there's just going to be pain until we get through this. And I was watching this clip, and then I noticed the Dow was only at like 24,000. And I realized I was watching a clip from like 6 fucking years ago, which like broke my brain. The Dow's doubled in that time, and we're still having Trump's labor secretary talk about eggs being overpriced, which is fucking insane. There's excess that is being produced. It's being produced in incredible quantities. The amount of money in the society at large is insane, and it's not being taken away fast enough. So you're seeing it consolidate. You're seeing power consolidate. This is all of that ineffable excess of things where Trump and all of these weirdos from Silicon Valley have too much money, and it's a problem because power concentrates with them. They can determine things. They can go, you voted for the right guy. Here's $1 million, which is a thing that fucking happened. I guess this happened. That the things they can be doing are so fucking insane because they have all of the excess. Society is built and capitalism is built to destroy that excess. And these things are part of that. As we're moving away from that, as there's this weird libertarian push to not even give to the military to destroy it, it's an absolutely wild thing to watch this massive excess build up and not be consumed in work programs, to not be consumed in proper wage labor or in healthcare for everyone, because we have enough. We have enough as a society. Again, we produced enough food as humanity for everyone on Earth for the last few years. So enjoy that fact with a third of people starving. Yay! This is where we are. It's really weird, but this is actually the function of capital. It's actually the function of capital. It's built in. I can't do another few hours of this. This has been absolutely lovely. I cannot believe that I maintained 40 plus people through the entirety of this fucking read, and I appreciate it, and I adore all of you for it. It's amazing. Now, let me figure out where the fuck I send you is the question, because I don't think anyone's live. If anyone else has questions, feel free to ask away. It's a fucking dark time, and it's not great, to say the least. It's not great. It is not great. Not a great time. But hey, what can I say? In time. Perfect. The House and Senate have passed the Epstein bill. Well, let's go raid in time. If I can. There you are. Go give love to Nick and everyone over there. The Epstein bill passed, and Trump is apparently backing it now. And it's going to be really, again, the economy is on the verge of crashing. We're going to have the single worst Christmas spending that consumers have ever had in America, which I'm gobsmacked by. It's going to be really, really, really wild 2 months. And Peter Thiel and SoftBank and a few others pulled all their money out of NVIDIA and a bunch of AI shit. So, enjoy.
This is the end.
This is the end. It's going to be weird. But again, capitalism will find a way. Don't worry. It'll always, always, always find a way. But let me do the outro. We'll be done here. Hey, everyone. Thank you for joining. If you really want to join, you can always join us on Discord. Discord.gg/DGQC. You can always yell at me. Tell me why I'm stupid and wrong. Someone corrected me because on the other day stream, I said hylomorphism and I got it backwards. I was talking about something different, which happens because, hey, I'm not streaming about stupid, dumb shit. My brain doesn't work so well sometimes. It's a lot. But you can come yell at me and tell me when I'm wrong. I would love that. Of course, if you want to support in other ways, you can drop a super chat membership or head over to patreon.com/DGQC. $5 a month goes to a huge, huge, huge way for me to sort of have the stability to be able to do this more full time. And of course, I guess with that, I'll see you all soon enough.